In there he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Great to have you company on this glorious Easter holidays weathery day. I mean, I say that because it's just a bit drizzly and grey and miserable out the window. I hope it's better where you are. Hope we can bring you some cheer. Thank you very much for joining us, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or watching on your connected device. It is lovely to have your company. Lots to talk about. Bins, you know me. Always love to talk about bins, but I mean, never in this circumstance. But bin workers in Birmingham have voted to reject what they called a totally inadequate offer from the City Council aimed at ending their long-running strike over pay. It's been going since early March. Unite, one of Britain's largest trade unions, is warning this could lead to a series of nationwide walkouts in the event of any further pay disputes like the row in Birmingham, and others are on their way. Spoke to my bin man today just to ask reassurance. He says they're not planning a strike. Fingers crossed for me, fingers crossed for you. But also it's been revealed that Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband encouraged Chinese involvement in key parts of UK's critical infrastructure less than a month before the government wrested control of British Steel from its Beijing shareholders over the weekend. I know, I'm as surprised as you are. Ed Miliband is something of a hypocrite. And of course, want to talk more about that horrific attack on 3 prison officers by Manchester Arena terrorist Hashim Abedi. Islamic hate preacher Anjem Chowdhury is suspected of inspiring the attack on those prison officers. Also, NHS trusts are fast-tracking ethnic minorities to top jobs to meet diversity quotas, with at least 11 major hospital trusts in England running schemes focusing on helping ethnic minority employees to gain promotion to senior roles. I do not know why people think this is acceptable on any scale. This is racism, just by a different name. We'll talk about all of that, plenty more besides. Joining me for the whole chat is Benjamin Butterworth, journalist and broadcaster. Good morning to you once again.
Good morning, Julia.
Lovely to see you. I want to start, though, with the Sun front page today and a poll they've carried out of red wall voters. It's crucial. This is where a lot of these seats that have got local elections, a lot don't have local elections, but they're polled voters voters in the northwest, northeast, Yorkshire, East Midlands, West Midlands. It's by Survation, and it's basically where in last year's general election Labour reclaimed scores of seats that they had lost back in 2019 to Boris Johnson, get Brexit done, and then those went whoosh, just literally like a pack of cards, went straight over to Labour, hence that huge majority. Well, not looking so good now for Labour's Red Wall. A new poll has revealed that 2/3, 68% of people in those seats think that Britain is broken and that the country is heading in the wrong direction. Just 21% saying it's going the right way. My God, if you think the country's going... Forget your personal party political views. If you genuinely think the country's going the right direction, I mean, wow, you have been living under one heavy stone in blackout conditions. But basically, people are expressing concern about immigration, about the NHS, about the economy. This comes just, the latest figures on record channel crossings, the bin strike ongoing, threat that could spread, a general feeling that things are going very badly wrong. What do you make of that poll, and what do you think Keir Starmer will be making of it, who, by the way, is rated by those polled as a less good potential Prime Minister than Nigel Farage, leader of Reform?
Yeah, and indeed, Nigel Farage leads when asked who best understands the issues that working people face.
Very telling, that.
And even on the question of the NHS, which Labour almost always is ahead in polling, well, it's ahead, but only 5 points of Nigel Farage. Now, given Nigel Farage has made comments in the past about a very different way of structuring healthcare, that's quite amazing.
I thought you were going to go, he said we should privatise the NHS. That's, again, not what he said. It was just, we could have the system that works in the rest of Europe, where they have better health outcomes and no waiting lists. I mean, that would be a crazy thing to do, wouldn't it?
Well, hopefully we'll have no waiting lists in 4 years. But I mean,
sorry, even the Labour Party has not pledged that.
Well, they're trying to get rid of the backlog of
No.
7
They've
million,
never suggested. They've never suggested clearing the waiting list. I think their best case scenario is getting it down to half what it is.
Well, fingers
so
crossed.
So only 3.5 million people on the waiting list for healthcare.
I mean, waiting lists are down 6 months in a row. But I think what this shows you is that, and it's quite understandable, obviously, the fact that so much stuff, it's not tangible that anything has changed. Now, I guess the Labour Party would say, and understandably, well, it's never going to happen in 9 or 10 months, whatever it's been.
And that's fair.
Yeah, of course.
But it has got a lot worse in a lot of metrics.
But I think for a lot of people, they feel like it's not been, 9 or 10 months of struggle. It's been a decade of things not being good enough, of their wages stagnating, of the council services not being good enough, of not seeing a doctor sufficiently quickly. And I think that, I guess the problem that any government would face is this idea that people don't want to put up with it any longer. And I think what's slightly worrying about this in a way is that, of course, the country isn't going in the right direction, but would we have been better if a government had just come in and spent lots of money it didn't have? How does a government justify
the government did
this?
spend a lot of money it didn't have.
Well, not this one.
Yes, it did. It spent lots of money it didn't have. It just on things that perhaps lots of other people wouldn't agree with, like, train drivers getting a pay rise. I know it's not in the multiple billions, I get that, but there's still lots more money going into public services. I mean, nothing's being cut. We're borrowing more.
Tell that to the civil servants, 120,000 of them.
No, but their spending isn't being cut. We're spending more.
True. But I think, it'll be alarming to Keir Starmer, it'll be alarming to the Labour Party.
I would have thought, especially ahead of local elections coming up in early May. I mean, this is the thing, I suppose, look, on a more positive note, ask a question I want to ask our audience today. I'd love to hear from you. What is wrong with Britain? If we're heading the wrong direction, what specifically is it that bothers you? Cited in this poll, immigration, the NHS, the economy are by a long way the top 3 issues that voters are citing in terms of heading in the wrong direction. I want to know with you, what is wrong with Britain? And crucially, what would you do to fix it? I think a lot of us have just given up on the politicians for any party to actually come up with this. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. Free on YouTube, free, of course, on X. So do get in touch, get your messages on air. Really gutted we didn't get as many calls on air that I wanted to yesterday, because we had so many amazing guests in the studio. Douglas Murray, Maggie Oliver among them. An absolute pleasure to have them in the studio. But I know we want to hear more from you as well. But say 2/3 of voters in Red Wall seats believe Britain is broken. It's heading in the wrong direction. What do you think? What do you think of that? And do you agree? And if so, what would you do to fix it? Benjamin, what would you do to fix it?
Great question.
He nervous laughter.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm honest. I mean, the fact is that the money doesn't add up, right? The answer is growth, but then that's so much harder to achieve, especially in the economic environment we've had under Donald Trump.
It's easier to achieve if you don't put a tax on jobs, for instance.
But I really do think the government isn't without good logic, because the problems in things like the NHS, it's like the potholes, right? You can keep covering them up at a modest cost, or you can relay the roads and fix it for a generation. And I actually do think there was a strong logic to raising some money to actually deal with the problems properly.
I think if anyone who genuinely wanted to fix a lot of stuff in this country would actually have to be spending a lot of money on infrastructure. The thing is, no one trusts that it's going to be spent well. It tends to be spent on the wrong things, and there's no point doing any of that if you still got completely failed policies along the way. So, for instance, I don't think there's any point ploughing way more money into the NHS, given I think the system is part of the problem. You have to change the system. I don't think there's any point in ploughing, money into investment in industry and infrastructure if you've still got net zero policies which are making us poorer. There's no point saying, well, we need to raise some more money, if we want, but we're going to have growth if you are taxing jobs. I just find it extraordinary. Look. To a certain extent, Rachel Reeves has been given the get out of jail card free because she can blame all tariffs and that for where she's going to be at the autumn budget. But actually, most of it is going to be down to the choices that she made. And this is the problem of people who've never run a business, don't appear to ever talk to anyone who's ever run a business. And I'm not talking about people who are running M&S or
They do actually. The CEO of M&S talks to the government regularly.
Well, he needs to give a bit more advice. People who run small businesses are just about when you actually put a tax literally on jobs, on the cost of employing the extra person, you are not going to see growth. Full stop, end of. And anyone who's worked in that world told them that, but they did it anyway. So if growth is the answer, it's also, to me, it's what you do with the growth, isn't it?
Well, one of the problems we have is that if you're under 40, a lot of the money...
Oh, he's going to go on that one again.
No, but a lot of money that you're paying is going to go on renting a property, on day-to-day costs, not on investing in your future or being able to take a risk having the money to start a business. And I think that's a fundamental problem. If I were to do something, it would be to rip up the planning rules even more.
Build more houses.
Build everywhere.
It's the motto of the show, build more houses.
Exactly. And I do actually think there are lots of problems, but that's a big structural problem that, whether you're renting or on the housing ladder, it's just so hard to have any money left after that basic cost.
Absolutely. But plus you're all going on holiday and drinking your chai lattes. But there we are. I do know. I know that giving up your morning coffee in Starbucks or whatever isn't going to be a difference between making a deposit or not. But I do find an awful lot of young people who say, I can't save up, I can't afford something. I completely accept that the ratio of what a cost of a home is pretty much across the country, but certainly in the southeast where we're sitting right now, is so much greater than it was in my day. I mean, it was already sky high on my day, but certainly my parents' day. But at the end of the day, an awful lot of people who did buy in days gone past, in years gone by, they would have given up everything else. There were no foreign holidays. They weren't buying new stuff. They didn't have new gadgets. They didn't do a lot of things. They didn't go out to eat, and they saved up to buy. And a lot of people go, I expect to eat out 3 times a week, go on foreign holidays. I've got my latest iPhone. I get my latte in my Starbucks. Oh, I've got no money to save to rent, to after my rent to buy a home. I'm just saying a little bit more managing of women who spend £30 every 2 weeks on having their nails done. Don't tell me that you've got no money. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I refuse to accept that. She said with her ratty nails. But there we are. The thought of having all that done. Oh, anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 if you want to have a rant about younger generation. I'm always pleased to hear it. Let's also talk about the unions threatening to spread bin strikes across the country. Union workers in Birmingham overwhelmingly voted to reject a deal to end the bin strikes. They've been going on since early March. Extraordinary report I saw this morning that the cost of cleaning up the bins, the rubbish bins and the overloaded bin bags around the city right now would be in the region of £200 million, because you've got to get it somewhere. The normal routine of, of them being collected, every day, and then because you're superseding that and more rubbish is being added all the time, you're looking at a multi-million pound cost. And by the way, guess who's going to pay it? Oh, the taxpayers of Birmingham, who've already seen a massive hike in their council tax because of total abject mismanagement by Birmingham City Council over many, many years.
And also, then you've got the pest control, because now there are rats all over Birmingham from the fact that it's full of rubbish. I mean, it's extraordinary where this comes from. So a couple of waste recycling and collection officer jobs were cut off.
Well, it's about, there's a dispute in terms of how many. I always hate it with these disputes because the union will say one thing and then sources from the council will say another. Why don't they just put what are the facts on the table and let us decide?
Yeah, I found it hard to work out exactly.
Is
what
it
the question
17 or is it eight of them? But they're basically removing a particular role to cut costs.
Exactly, and the suggestions is only 17 of them. Other reports say 150. But the idea that such a modest number of people, over £8,000, can bring an entire city to a halt.
That's the point of trade unions.
Right, but I mean, it's pretty alarming that they haven't met in the middle. And for the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, who is close to Unite the Union, the union representing
They're all
them,
close to Unite. They're a big funder.
They simply refused to accept the offer, which she reportedly pleaded in the room with them to take. And then she said she'd called in the army, but actually it's just 3 people that work in the armed forces doing logistics from Whitehall.
I have to say, what I could not work out, I'm all in favour. If you want to send the army and just get them on...
I would.
That's what's necessary to do, because it is an emergency. It's a health emergency. But the idea that you need anyone... I mean, I'm sorry, I could run the logistics of removing those in. Send in lorries, right? Pick up the bin bags and take them to wherever you take them to. I don't think that's a logistics issue, isn't it? It's kind of basic, isn't it?
Yeah, you need the staff, I suppose. That's
staff,
the whole
but
point.
I mean, again, like, she can't. Isn't that part of the problem? The fact that the local council can't even do this without the military. I'm all in favour of the military getting involved and doing the grunt work because they are really good at getting stuff done.
Yeah, I suppose the argument would go that people that signed up to fight for their country didn't sign up to clean up excrement in the streets of Birmingham. But ultimately, it's an emergency, and
they're about like the last only functioning public service. Thank you, gents and ladies.
And also, it's awful for anybody that lives there. But also, there's a question of some people. You see some of the piles in the streets. Could they not? I would drive to the tip if rather than put it outside my front door.
No, apparently people haven't been able to, and the tips have been full, and
Well, Joe Lycett, the Birmingham comedian, has been encouraging people to, please God, go to the tip.
I was thinking, I spoke to one of my bin men this morning. They were collecting the bins this morning. I mean, I usually don't. They're very nice lads. And I just said, you're not going on strike. They said, no, pal. I went, thank God for that. It's bad enough already in our street. But I have to say, I was thinking of our house. Right, OK, if they did, we would have to have a better system with the amount of stuff that's just dumped in, that's loose. It's like, these things matter. And especially, I mean, one thing actually people of Birmingham are lucky about, it's not hot weather. If this was happening in July or August, in an unusual summer for Britain, then that would be quite a different matter. Let's talk, just before we go to break, let's talk about what's been going on in our prisons there. This horrific attack by Hashim Abedi, the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber, but involved in the plot. His attack at the weekend on 3 prison officers, one stabbed in the face and the throat, one stabbed in the back, burnt with hot oil. Again, big question marks being raised about this man, basically in a sort of special unit within a jail, in a high security jail, but allowed to use the kitchen, allowed to make his own meals. I mean, this has now been changed apparently. Oh, who thought it might be a bad idea that someone who's a terrorist, by the way, is already serving additional years on his sentence, which was originally 55 years, additional years. For an attack on a prison officer, that he should have access to sharp objects, able to fashion a knife out of a metal tray, they believe, and to hot oil. I mean, this is genuinely insane. Well, Ian Atchison, who's an expert on, and in fact, he was the prison governor, the man behind this move to put these Islamist extremist terrorists behind separate units. He says he should be isolated because even if it turns him mad, he says, to protect the staff, it is untenable that this man is not kept in isolation, kept in his cell. And we've got prison officers fearing being beheaded by extremist terrorists behind bars. And there's thought that the hate preacher Anjem Chowdhury is suspected of inspiring this attack, and he's been moved out of the jail. Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, pointed out yesterday that he'd been talking to prison officers, and 45%. 45% of prisoners at one jail in HMP Whitemoor now identify as Muslim. The vast majority of those are conversions while inside, and there have been numerous reports confirming this, that actually people are forced to convert. Basically, if you convert, you get our protection. If you don't convert, you're in trouble. If you don't eat halal, if you don't obey the rules that the Islamists, not the Islamist groups, insist on, you're going to have a very, very dangerous time behind bars. Now, I'm sorry, this is unacceptable.
Yeah, and the suggestion is that these prisons are becoming breeding grounds, not just for people converting to Islam, but for Islamism, which is incredibly dangerous. It's terrifying that, you know, when these people, the ones that will be released, that you could have more terrorists rather than fewer.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're getting access to people who are, you know, a low-level criminal on his many repeat offences, often mental health problems, often drug problems, and then people are sort of pushed down this line. And we've seen this in previous attacks, people who have been converted behind bars.
Exactly, and I think the way that they're treating this is unacceptably weak. I mean, look at these two Obeidis. Now, both of them were born in Manchester. Their parents came from Libya, but they were born here.
Asylum seekers.
So you can't deport them. They are only British. But what you should do, as far as I'm concerned, they should be in solitary confinement. Because the idea he'd already...
Well, one of them's dead, thank God. But
the fact that he'd already attacked a police officer, a prison officer,
nothing to discuss at that point.
And then he's been allowed to do it again. I mean, I certainly don't share his views, but Tommy Robinson, they saw justice to put in solitary confinement. So how can you judge it's appropriate for someone like that?
No, but he's in solitary confinement for his own safety because of Islamists behind bars.
Yeah.
But the point is the prison authorities have lost control of prisons, and it is untenable that other prisoners, you know, we put them behind bars, but we don't put them there to be feared for their lives. So that's not acceptable. But we're also, crucially, more importantly, prison officers, we cannot... How could you possibly be expected to go to work with the threat of that happening to you every day? That is unacceptable.
I read an interview with the head of the body that represents prison officers last week, and he was saying about how they're so understaffed, about how discipline is so weak, and about how they often live in terror. And actually, one of the problems they have is that because they're not getting quality prison officers, they are behaving with inmates in a way that is not acceptable. All sorts of drugs get into these prisons. It messes with people's heads. You have the gang problems, and they're out of control. Not to mention, going back to the cost of public services, lots of these prisons are falling apart, so they're not able to facilitate their job properly.
And again, prisoners often kept behind bars 23 hours a day, just in their cell 23 hours a day. And people might say, oh, well, yeah, why not? Well, because actually that does not promote good things, and also that's why they're all doing drugs. If I was going to be in prison for a long stretch, and let's face it, it'll probably happen at some point.
I've been calling it for years.
Absolutely, I would 100% be on skunk. That'd be the only way of getting through. I'm sorry, it's a completely rational thing for these prisoners to do. They're not getting up at 7 o'clock, doing a day's work, you know, and working and learning a new skill, you know, things like that. They're not doing anything useful, and that's why. Oh, what a surprise when they come out! Guess what they do? Go back to crime. So much more to talk about. So much I want to hear from you from any of the topics we're talking about. Do also want to talk about that all-female Blue Origin space flight. What an embarrassment. I mean, it was an all hair extension space flight, as far as I could tell. All hair extension and Botox space flight. Genuinely an embarrassment to every woman on the sodding planet. We're going to talk about that up next. Want to get to your calls, want to get to your messages. In particular, I want to know, 2/3 of voters in the red wall seats, according to a new poll, claim that Britain is broken and heading in the wrong direction. I want to know from you, what do you think is wrong with Britain? Why are we heading in the wrong direction? And what would you do to fix it? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Right, now I'm not fussed about police officers having a whole raft of qualifications, but they must be able to read and write. And I understand in 2025, if by way of a recruitment drive, they need to teach people how to read and write, which I would still find a bit astonishing, then so be it. But police officers write statements, read them out in court, write crime reports and the such like. Anyway, there's so much lunacy about policing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:26 is the time. Let me get some of your messages coming in about voters in red wall seats and this poll saying they believe Britain is heading in the wrong direction. What would you do to fix broken Britain? Alison says the government is what's wrong with Britain. Well, we've had a change in government, Alison. Has that changed anything? Edmund says immigration, net zero, failure to act on grooming gangs, potholes. And I mean, how many more do you want? Sarah says only 2/3, so 1/3 of the country thinks Britain is fine. Ha ha! She makes a fair point. I think the poll actually said it was, I think, 9% don't know and 21% said they thought we were heading the right direction. I mean, seriously, 21% of people are on the happy pills is what I'd like to say to that. Freddie says a prime minister with a backbone would be a good start. Frank says globalists are what's wrong with Britain, i.e. those who support Ukraine. Oh, my God. Those who support a country that has been invaded by one of our enemies. Yeah, sorry about that, Frank. Jacob says an understatement at best. Have you seen Britain's roads? Overrun hotels with illegal migrants. Trains don't work. The problems are endless. Diana says we have left-wing teachers and lecturers who hate Britain. They're indoctrinating the next generation to do the same. Do you know, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Dan, and particularly after the conversation we had with the brilliant Douglas Murray. Got that out on YouTube. It's on my Twitter feed, the link for that. It's a great reaction to that. I mean, literally every single thing is a thumbs up going, love this guy. A lot of you agreed with me. You want him to run for Prime Minister because he's so sane on so many of the key issues. Let's go to the phone line. Stuart's on the line. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000. Stuart is in Wigan. Good morning, Stuart. What is wrong with Britain? What is broken and how can we fix it?
We've gone too soft. We've gone way too soft.
On what?
We need to get rid of people on everything. Basically, if you look at the police force, you look everywhere. Do you know what I mean? You look in schools, everything. There's no respect.
Yep.
The police, I mean, joking apart, I would employ another police service and get them trained up and then sack these that we've got now because they're just not willing to do the job.
I think a lot of the time it's the police chiefs who are the problem. A lot of the police officers on the beat are hanging their heads in shame at what they're being asked to do.
I don't agree with you there because...
Really?
It won't. No, because at the end of the day, if somebody turns around to me and says, well, past that kid there getting abused because we might get called racist or it might upset a few people, I know where they're getting told to go.
Yeah, that's the example of Maggie Oliver also on the show yesterday, doing that crowdfund to basically try and get prosecutions of people who basically failed in their job in public office to protect those children.
Yeah. Now, to me, if you've got that sort of spine and backbone where you can take an order and walk away from a kid getting abused or just not listen to it, you've got issues, and to me, you'd be sorted out. And
okay, well, this has been going on a very long time, so Britain's been broken for a very long time. What would you do to fix it?
Like I said, I would go back probably 50 years. I'd put more money, and I mean more money. I'll get rid of foreign aid, and I'd get rid of everything going abroad, to be honest. I'll put that money into the army, and I would make the army like it was, as it was, and stop worrying about what's happened in other wars and this, that and the other, because I'm not apologising for being English or British. I'm not apologising for that.
I'm with you.
We have never, ever left the country in a worse position than we went in.
I don't know, I'm thinking about Iraq at this point in time, but I'm blaming the Americans more for that. Stuart, fantastic call. Thank you very much. Do you agree with Stuart? Do you disagree? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Matthew's on the line. He's in Fife. Matthew, what's wrong with Britain and what would you do to fix it?
I think the issue is your die-hard supporters. So you've got all your swing voters that will, if that's the right term for it, that will vote for whoever says the right thing.
Yeah.
But I think because you've got so, like, whether you're Tory or Labour or Lib Dem, you're preaching the same spiel as each other. Just go out and
Oh, the line's gone.
they're the ones.
So sorry, Matthew, the line went a bit funny, but you're basically saying that because the people you'll stick to, I vote Labour, end of, I vote Tory, end of, or whatever, that we don't get change because those parties know that they've got a certain amount of votes no matter what.
Exactly, which is why then when you get your Reform UK, who, for a lot of the stuff, not all of it, speak a lot of sense, but for some people, like, they don't like change. They're so set in their ways, they're just like, no, I can't see past I can't see the wood for the trees, essentially.
Yeah.
And Britain has always been broken. It's just always had a plaster over it. And
We've always been broken?
I think so. Since maybe the end of the Second World War, I think it's pretty much the last time Britain really was. Because if you look at the 70s, that was guff. The 80s was still a bit of a boom, but it was
80s was great for some people, not for others, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then the 90s, that was just borrowed money. It wasn't ours. We weren't doing anything. We borrowed to the point of now we're skint.
Yeah. One of my biggest regrets is that we just basically, as I think Boris Johnson said, we spaffed up the wall, the proceeds of North Sea oil. Wish we'd done what Norway had done, creating a sovereign wealth fund, and you're allowed to spend a certain amount, and you've got that to spend on major infrastructure and major issues for decades and even hundreds of years to come. That would have been a game changer for our country, but no politician in our country would think that far ahead. It's always the next election, the next local election, the next party political broadcast, isn't it?
Get back in rather than actually rolling the dice and just going for it. At least Boris Johnson had a bit of conviction and went, "This is what I'm doing."
Did he?
And his party didn't like it.
Can you tell me a conviction he had?
Sorry?
Can you tell me a conviction? I'm still struggling to find anything that Boris Johnson actually thinks that he actually believes in.
I don't think maybe that was a wrong word, but at least he had the sort of the I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. I.e., with the lockdown, whether you liked it or not, at least he went for it. What would anybody else have done in that position?
Oh well, if he was Keir Starmer, we'd still be locked down now. So let's be grateful for small mercies. If it wasn't for Partygate, genuinely, we'd have gone into lockdown for a fourth time. Madness. Matthew, interesting call. Thank you very much. Agree with some, don't agree with others. 10:33 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Up next, I'm going to talk to the brilliant Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online about all of the big stories of the day. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
10:35 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth still with me. Let's get his thoughts in a few moments after we hear from the chief political writer at Spiked Online, friend of the show, Brendan O'Neill. A very, very good morning to you.
Hi, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Very much appreciate you joining us. I must point out, by the way, I'm doing your Spiked Online podcast tonight, live for Spiked members, I think from 7 o'clock tonight. So very much looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
That'll be great.
A little bit of a plug, why not? Don't forget that. Right, let's talk. I mean, I don't even know where we start, but I think we should start with this new poll. 2/3 of people, according to a Survation poll carried out and on the front page of The Sun today, believe the country is broken, heading in the wrong direction. The poll also suggests this is a poll of red wall seats, the ones that went to Boris in 2019 and then basically went to Labour last July at the election. It shows that actually reform would sweep through that red wall in any election, and obviously pretty bad news for Labour. But what do you make of so many people in this country feeling that the country's broken and heading in the wrong direction?
Yeah, that's really worrying. You know, I try to avoid doomerism. I don't like to be too down about things. And, you know, Britain is still a great country with great people and great potential. I think that's a given for many of your listeners, as well as for a lot of people out there. But it feels like the country is being let down by the political class. That's the problem. And it's especially being let down by the Labour government right now. Labour is not realising the potential of this country. It is not bigging this country up. In fact, it's very often doing the opposite. It's really squandering all the wonderful things about this country that could potentially be brought to the surface. So I think people feel that things are broken, things aren't working, things aren't doing what they should be doing.
I don't think they feel that. I think things aren't working. I spent ahead of the year to the last general election, asking all the cabinet ministers and ministers who came on my show, tell me a public service that works.
Yeah.
And there's sort of terribly embarrassed long pause.
You know, I find myself thinking that all the time now. And I did wonder if it's because I'm getting old, but I do find myself thinking...
We're just becoming curmudgeons.
Yeah. Why is the pavement always cracked? Why are there so many bumps? Why are the trains late? Why is this bus service not running? I do find myself thinking that. And it does feel like we're being raided for more and more money. They're constantly taking more money of us, and yet things are getting worse.
Yeah. Well, if you spend 100 billion a year servicing the interest on your debt, that will happen because you haven't got that money to spend on other things. But I think people have felt that a long time. But what is interesting is I think, you know, the people in charge, and I feel this with the Conservatives and Labour, and I think Lib Dems and actually an awful lot of the parties too, that this idea they actually don't really like our country very much. They think we're a bit embarrassing. Our past is embarrassing. Our values are embarrassing. That a lot of us are awful bigots because we've got an issue with mass uncontrolled immigration and you know, another topic we'll talk about, you know, positive discrimination for ethnic minorities, anti-white discrimination. And they just don't like us. They don't like our history. They don't like our country. They don't like our culture. They don't like us very much. So why on earth would they try and boost the country?
That's exactly it. You know, this is partly an economic problem. Money is not being spent in the right way, but it's also a cultural problem. They just don't believe in this nation. They think our history is one crime after another. They think the people in this country are all racist and a bit stupid. We're all gammon. They think we need to bring labour from overseas because people in this country are too lazy and feckless. They just if you think like that, you're going to let the country go to rack and ruin because you don't care. All we're asking for is a political class that actually loves the country that it rules, and that we used to have that in the past, whether you agreed with them or disagreed with them. They tended to like Britain. We don't have that at the moment.
No, absolutely. And again, we get that with the sort of that desperate urge. And there's reports today about, you know, this government trying to take us back into the EU by the back door, aligning our rules and laws with EU rules and laws, but then still wanting a free trade deal with America. I'm not sure you can do both, by the way. and just undermining that public vote, totally just ignoring that public vote. But then we have the Tories ignoring that public vote, saying we want control of immigration, and Boris Johnson having the Boris wave of 1.2 million people being given visas in 1 year. I mean, not what voters asked for. In fact, what voters expressly said they didn't want, but just being ignored all the time. Let's talk about something that people can't ignore, especially on the streets of Birmingham. That's that bins not being collected for over a month. The threats that this bin strike could actually spread nationwide by the Unite Union. Labour the union has basically said we are not going to do a deal. They've rejected almost unanimously this deal that was on the table from Birmingham City Council. What should happen? Should the army be sent in? Should everybody be sacked? I mean, because I think that trade unions do play an important role in our country still, and a lot, especially for people in jobs where they haven't got sort of unique skills which they can sell individually, and it's only by working together. And yet I also just don't think it's acceptable for people's bins not to be collected for a month.
Exactly right. I think trade unions can play an important role. I support the right to strike, and I think working people deserve a good wage and good working conditions. And I think we too often look down our noses at rubbish collectors, even though they do such an incredibly important...
I never do. Honestly, I wrote a whole piece the other day about they're more essential personnel than most of us.
Absolutely. I think you and I talked during the lockdown, Julia, about how if they stopped working, then the lockdown would be over straight away, because what would happen to the country? Well, we can see what would happen to the country right now in Birmingham. It's horrible what's happening there. But, having said all that, I do think there are certain things that shouldn't be allowed to happen in 21st century Britain. And one of them is piles of rubbish on the streets. It's unhygienic. It's unsafe. There are rats roaming around. And who is suffering the most as a result of this? Working class communities, poorer communities, where this rubbish is stacking up and it's a threat to the local people. So something needs to be done. The army needs to be brought in, or someone needs to be brought in to clear this rubbish, and then they can carry on their talks with the trade union.
We're going to talk to a local councillor in Birmingham in a few minutes' time. And actually, what's interesting, some pictures that the Guido Fawkes site put out of some drone imagery of the Unite headquarters in Birmingham, their bin area, the big, massive big bins, all very clean and pristine. Their bins are definitely being collected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tells you everything.
It's the whole two-tier thing again. People feel that two-tier sensation on so many issues right now, not just law and policing, but also things like this, where we're surrounded by rubbish and services that don't work, whereas people higher up the chain have got everything they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's also talk about two-tier. Let's talk about the NHS. We've had some extraordinary stories about police and lots of whistleblowers, and then police chiefs being very blatant and open about the fact that they are basically fast-tracking ethnic minority candidates over white candidates, even not allowing white candidates to apply, not giving them any help with the interview process, and then black candidates or Asian candidates getting that help. We had a story here yesterday about one police service being sent out to basically into largely Muslim areas to get Muslim people to sign up, even if they actually could barely speak English, who were relatively new arrivals for the police. I mean, absolute absurdities. The latest revelation in our public service, NHS trusts fast-tracking ethnic minorities to top jobs, and basically making sure there was an ethnic minority on the shortlist and people being given extra help. And again, that choice where if you've got two candidates the same, as if any two candidates would ever be exactly the same, your priority should be given to the ethnic minority candidate. I mean, this is what we used to just call racism, but apparently this is good racism, so it's okay.
Yeah, I think this is a disaster. This is a disaster for every community in Britain. It's bad for the white community, the white working class community, or the white middle class community, because it means they're being overlooked. I think it's bad for ethnic minority communities too, because there's always going to be that suspicion. Well, are you in this position because of the colour of your skin? Yep. Did you get this position in an undeserving way? And that's going to generate suspicion of people in those positions, and sometimes even resentment.
Yeah, and totally undermining it. It's the same way as quotas for women. We don't need quotas.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you play the politics of race. You always stir up racial tension. It might not be like the racial tensions we had in the past, where there were riots on the streets and all sorts of other violent acts, but you will create a simmering resentment within society, because you almost pitch much. You pit one community against another in racial terms, and that's a recipe for conflict.
And again, it's this idea that, you know, obviously we don't want people, whether for their religious or whether they're women, religious views or their ethnicity, to not be getting a job, but those aren't any reasons that are remotely relevant to them getting a job. It is utterly bizarre that you kind of solve one problem by creating a whole new problem. You just say that, and we've discussed it so many times, that wasn't how we were brought up. We were brought up to try and be colourblind rather than to be obsessed with it, as these people clearly are. And again, if diversity was our strength and this would actually make all our public services and everything work better, well, the proof would be in the pudding by now already, wouldn't it? And it ain't already been there. Let's talk just one final question. I want to ask you about these horrific attacks on prison officers by Hashim Abedi, the brother of the Manchester Arena attacker, a terrorist. Absolutely horrific injuries certainly for two of these police officers. Amazing they survived. But the thought now that Anjem Chowdhury, the hate preacher who's behind bars, was in prison, that he may have inspired this attack. Got prison officers fearing being beheaded. We've got an expert on prison extremism in Atchison who's saying that this bomber should be basically isolated, even if he goes mad. And the absurd situation, as pointed out by Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, that 45% of prisoners at one jail, HMP Whitemoor, now identify as Muslims. The vast majority of those are people who've converted while inside. Something is going horribly wrong behind bars, is it not?
Massively wrong. It seems to me that in some prisons or some wings of prisons, radical Islamists almost have free reign. It's almost like they run the area, and they can even convert people, as that quote says, convert or get hurt. You know, they have that kind of power, and they should not have that power, not even in society, never mind inside a prison where they're being punished. I really agree with the families of the Manchester Arena victims who said that Abedi should be in a cell for 23 hours a day. He should be let out for 1 hour a day for exercise with a prison guard, and that's how he should live the rest of his life. He should not have privileges. He should not be able to use the kitchen.
Yeah,
he should
make
not be
his own food. What on earth was going through their minds?
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And punishment has to be for people like that. Now, I'm soft on some issues. I think if it's a young mother who's committed an offence, then maybe we can take that into consideration. And some prisons should be softer than other prisons. I absolutely agree.
Well, we already have that, yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to the radical Islamist mass murderers of children, they need to be punished for the rest of their lives. So we need to get tough and really isolate these prisoners.
Absolutely. People keep forgetting the point of prison is fundamentally number one job, punishment. Brendan O'Neill, always good to talk to you, Chief Political Writer at Spectrum. I look forward to talking to you later. Just a brief word for Benjamin Butterworth. Just going back to that issue that Brendan was saying about, you know, this is, you know, we're talking about this is a country, broken country, but that actually a lot of the people in charge, whichever party, don't really like our country or its history or what it stands for anymore.
I don't think it's fair to say that they don't like the country, but I think there's a question about how much they understand the country. You know, on different parties, we have people that come from narrower backgrounds that have only worked in politics. It's why you've heard lots of stories of people that lost their seats as MPs, can't get a job. Well, you can't get a job because you don't have any other skills. Yeah. And I think maybe a problem is that this breadth of people, where they come from in the country and their background, just doesn't reflect.
I'm certainly
the
opposed
country.
to sort of, you know, 25-year-olds getting a job as an MP. I'm sorry, I just go and get a proper job first and then maybe do it later.
For me, at the last election, you know, considering running, I thought, well, actually, I don't know enough to do that, and I think some more people should think that.
Yeah, but that's most of our MPs, if you ask me. 10:48 is time. We'll take a break. We're going to go back to the bin issue. We're going to talk to a councillor at Birmingham City Council about what is going on and how they're going to fix the issue of the bins simply not being collected and unions refusing to accept the latest deal. This is Talk.
instead of being upfront with the British people about the identity of the individual that killed those children, and we now discover that they were killed in the most brutal of circumstances. I think one of the girls was stabbed 125 times. 125 times. Just consider the violent nature of the individual required, obviously, to kill a child, but to stab 125 times and then attempt to take her head off.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:51 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest. He's Councillor Timothy Huxtable. He's a Conservative Cabinet Member for Highways and the Environment at Birmingham City Council. I bet you can guess what we're going to be talking about. Yep, bin collections, or rather, the lack of them. Timothy Huxtable, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Julia.
So you're a member responsible partly for highways and the environment. Well, this very much comes under your jurisdiction. Then no bin collections for more than a month. There were rolling bin strikes from January onwards. The council has failed to do a deal with Unite members representing the local bin collection officers, and we're looking at the strikes continuing. How bad is it going to get?
Well, just one point, Julia. I'm the shadow cabinet member for Environment and Transport, so I don't actually run the service. Well, when I heard that the vote yesterday was to continue the strike, I just thought it's insufferable already. It's just going to get even worse, and I was completely dismayed. It's bad at the moment. The last figures that I heard were there were 21,000 tonnes of uncollected waste on the streets of Birmingham. The strikes have been going on from early January, so we've had the suspension of recycling collections, we've had the suspension of bulk waste collections, we've had the suspension of green waste collections.
Can people just take them? I mean, one of the suggestions from my guest Benjamin Butler was, can people just take their rubbish to the dump?
They can.
Or is the dump already full? I mean, our local dump, they seem to require for you to make an appointment sometimes.
No. Everyone has to make an appointment, but they have extended the opening hours in Birmingham twice since the bin strike.
Okay, because I read this morning that we're looking at the cost of cleaning up the amount of waste that is now on the streets, £200 million, which of course will be paid for by the council taxpayers of Birmingham, who've already seen a massive hike in their council tax because the City Council has been run so badly in recent years.
Absolutely, and we had a 7.5% council tax increase this year, one of the highest across England, and that's on top of a 10% last year.
Yeah.
So it really
for worse
is
services.
And worse services. Bins is the obvious one, but they're cutting library hours. My local libraries used to be 5 days a week, 35 hours. They're now being reduced to 21 hours a week.
Well, that's particularly an issue. I mean, and a lot of students doing GCSEs and A-levels and they go and work in libraries. A lot of people don't have a home they can work in during the day, so that's going to affect particularly kids on lower incomes. Well, that's a big issue. The thing is, a lot of the problems about this, the financial situation that Birmingham's in, would have happened whoever was in charge. There's been a lot of mismanagement over the years. It's a massive council, biggest council in Europe. I hadn't realised, but a lot of this comes down to this 2010 tribunal decision, and a couple of years later a Supreme Court view that pay of equal value should be paid, jobs of equal value, should be paid the same. So bin collectors being paid the same as the dinner ladies, but that means dinner ladies had to have a pay raise and they're getting back pay. And you're talking about multi-100 million pound back pay. Now, whether the Tories were in charge, the Reform, Lib Dem, whoever, still be stuck with that, wouldn't you? So it's not all down to Labour mismanagement who've been controlling the council.
It actually is, because those issues are historic and were settled. What the problem is that those issues were recreated in 2017 by the current Labour administration, ironically, to avoid industrial action in the run-up to local elections.
Okay.
So, and since 2017, not only have they created those equal pay liabilities that Birmingham is suffering from at the moment, but they've also had put millions of pounds into an athletes' village for the Commonwealth Games that didn't host a single athlete. And they also oversaw a computer system called Oracle, which is costing the City Council millions and millions of pounds because it's not fit for purpose. And we haven't been able to have proper accounts for many years.
Right, so there's a lot of other stuff that's been the decisions of that particular council. In terms of where we are in terms of the actual bin strikes right now, let's talk about them spreading to other cities and towns across the country. What would be a reasonable deal? Because it's very difficult to make head or tail of what the real situation is, because the Unite Union of Bin Workers are saying, so, 150 members of staff could face losing up to £8,000 pay by them basically abolishing a particular role that isn't in... Not every council has this particular role, and they could save money that way. But then the council say, it's only a handful of people who are facing that, and they won't lose that much money. It's very difficult to make a judgment from outside when we don't know the facts.
Well, the role is unique to Birmingham, and that was the role that was created by the City Council 8 years ago.
As a way of giving everyone a pay rise.
As a way to avoid industrial action. So it is literally a mess of their own creation.
Right.
And yet there have been offers from help since we declared a major incident from Conservative councils, Dudley and Walsall, which have not been accepted, so I'm told, by the Labour Council.
So with offers of help, as in we'll come in and collect your rubbish for you?
Absolutely. So we declared a critical incident, a major incident. Local Conservative councils have said we will help clear the streets, made the offer to Birmingham City Council. I was speaking to the leaders yesterday. The City Council has not come back and accepted their offers of help.
Very, I mean, that would be infuriating if you were living in Birmingham. I'm sure many of our audience right now. What about the calls for the army to be sent in? Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, has got, I think 3 people working on logistics. I don't know what the logistics are. Send in trucks, pick up the rubbish and take them to the dump. Seems to me to be fairly obvious to anybody. I'm not sure you need to have a qualification in logistics to do that. But do you want the army sent in? Do you want literally, let's send the army in, pick up the rubbish and clean up those streets?
Well, when you've got local authorities who have those people and those vehicles at that disposal and they're offering help and that help hasn't been accepted, that's what's needed.
Okay.
We need to declare a public health emergency. We need to get on, clean the streets of rubbish, of fly tipping, try and get Birmingham as clean as possible, and of course stop the public health emergency and rats.
Indeed, the rats, yes, indeed. Councillor Timothy Huxtable is Conservative. He's a shadow cabinet member for Highways and the Environment in Birmingham City Council. Thank you very much for joining us. Some interesting information there, but I think Benjamin Butler's very telling, if that is the case. If offers of help from local councils who happen to be Tories say, we'll come and help you collect your bins for you, if there's not even been a response, and people in Birmingham are dealing with having to live with this mess and the unsanitary conditions, that is outrageous.
Yeah, it's outrageous. And also, learning that these jobs were created as a short-term solution and now they realise they can't afford them in the long term. Doesn't that just boil down to the problem we have in our political system? You said it earlier, I think. It's just about getting across the line on each election.
I mean, it ties in, I think, with train drivers and things like that. I mean, when there are massive strikes, it's all about whether or not you have someone whose job it is, to clear the signal or whatever. When if loads of other train companies don't have that, why do you need that on that particular railway unless there's a specific reason? And you just find yourself like, oh, everyone's on strike. Sort of, why on earth is this happening? I'd love to hear your thoughts, honestly, if you are in Birmingham in particular, but I also want to hear from you. 2/3 of the country believe the country is heading in the wrong direction. It is broken. I want to know what's wrong with Britain and what would you do to fix it? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We are, of course, Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Back with you in just a moment.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah, a rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minot. this rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village need to use the old Aussie trick to stop being swooped. You have to wear an ice cream tub on your head with eyes drawn on the back so they think you're watching them. True story.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 3 minutes past 11 is the time. Whether you are watching on YouTube or on your connected device, listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, it's great to have your company. Lots more to talk about, including, of course, those bin strikes in Birmingham. Really interesting conversation there with the Birmingham City Councillor a couple of moments ago. Also, the Islamic hate preacher Anjem Chowdhury was suspected of inspiring that attack on 3 prison officers by the Manchester arena terrorist Hashim Abedi, brother of the man who planted that bomb, Salman Abedi. Also, the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick raising concerns about prisons being run by Islamist gangs, stating that in a government report, prisoners are being told to convert or get hurt. And Donald Trump has blamed Volodymyr Zelensky, among others, for starting the war with Russia. He said the Ukrainian leader shared the blame with Putin for millions of people dead in the Ukraine war. He's still claiming that millions of people dead. Millions of people are not dead. It's in the low hundreds of thousands. And quite a lot of those, by the way, are Russian soldiers it's Vladimir Putin who has sent in, a big mate of Donald Trump. I do find it's utterly, utterly bizarre how often that is cited. And we're going to be talking about all of that and plenty more besides with all of our top guests. Delighted to say that Benjamin Butterworth, journalist and broadcaster, is still joining me on the show. We locked the doors, he's still here. Yeah. Good morning.
I like the phrasing of all of our top guests and Benjamin Butterworth. I like to do that. I keep you on your toes, let's just come back to the question we're asking our audience today, and this is about this poll. It's the front page of The Sun today, showing that 2/3 of voters in red wall seats, you remember those are the seats where you're talking about the seats that have been Labour for years. That's it. You put a red rosette on a donkey, they are going to be voting Labour. And yet in 2019 they went overwhelmingly for Boris Johnson, the Conservatives, that get Brexit done pledge. Now they went very much back to Labour back in July last year at the last general election. Hence we saw that huge majority for Keir Starmer's Labour Party. But doesn't look like it's carrying on. The damning new poll by Survation for the Sun newspaper has carried out in those red wall seats, in particular the North West, the
North East, Yorkshire, East Midlands, West Midlands, has found that, well, the problem is actually they think that 2/3 of the people polled think that the country is broken and, crucially, heading in the wrong direction. Now, the question about do you think the country is heading in the right or the wrong direction is used in polling, particularly in America, actually, to decide what is going to happen at a presidential or a midterm election, and used here increasingly as well, because often what people say about how they're going to vote, how they're not going to vote, is not as accurate as when their view of how the country is actually doing. And if you've got a negative view of how the country is doing, people often again vote for an alternative party. If you've got a positive view, you're going to vote for the party that is governing. But just 23% say Britain isn't broken. That is 23% of people who are on some sort of drugs of some sort. I would love to take your happy pills with you. I don't know it's a party political point. If you genuinely think our country isn't broken right now and doesn't need to be, there needs so much remedial work to get it back up to scratch, I do not know what you're thinking, but you're living in a happier place than the rest of us. I want to know from you, what is wrong with Britain and what would you do to fix it? If you are one of those 23% you think there's nothing wrong, it's all just fine, we're going in the right direction, please also get in touch. I would love to hear from you. Either way, the number to call is 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Right, Benjamin, I mean, what is Britain broken and what would you do to fix it?
Well, I think Britain probably is broken, but actually, if you were to ask me, is it going in the right direction, I would be in the happy pill camp, because I'm not saying
what they put in your tea.
Yeah, it's only water so far. What I would say is that the country is broken, and when you can't get an NHS appointment and you can't afford a house, and lots of people are struggling, that's all real, right? But I actually think that a government that's being a bit more sensible, that's trying to fix some of those fundamental problems, is the definition of the right direction.
I'm very much in favour of. I think some of the things that West Streeting is doing in terms of the NHS, I don't think it's going to achieve very much. Even they don't believe they're going to get you mentioned they're going to get waiting lists over. No, they're not. Even they, like best case scenario, would be getting them down to half what they are. This is just not the norm in most European nations. People just think this is utterly bizarre that people have to wait so long for an appointment. Ripping up the planning rules, getting more people built, getting ability to build houses. Love all of that. But I'm not sure if I can think of anything else.
Well, actually, there's a story today that the number of low deposit mortgages is at the highest since 2008. So there are sprouts of things going better. And I don't say that just for the sake of the fact that I don't dislike the nature of this government, but also because one thing I think we have as a problem in Britain is that we don't like ourselves. We constantly are negative about the country. And yes, there's lots of things to be negative about.
Isn't that partly our sense of humour, self-deprecating? That whole America, USA. That's not us. We're Britain. We don't do that. We moan about the weather, talk about cups of tea, and that's what we do. We're self-deprecating and we're humorous about our nation and we mock ourselves. But at the same time, I think most people have a deeply, deeply ingrained pride in Britain and what we've done, but I don't think our leaders do.
I think we have a much greater sense of fairness in this country than a country like America. I think it means
most countries.
It means more to us.
I think a sense of fair play is our absolutely number one value, actually.
I 100% agree with that, and I think that's where our modesty comes from.
Yeah.
But something that drives me mad about Britain is that we seem to hate success. When you hear people on fabulous salaries or setting up great businesses, we think it's somehow crude to talk about that.
Yeah.
If someone gets a flash new car, it's like, oh, don't mention it. My grandmother would always be like that. She's like, oh, don't mention this to anybody.
Oh no, but also that idea that if someone has done well, this idea, oh well, they must have done it off the backs of other people. They've exploited people, as opposed to they had a great idea, they've worked really hard and they're making a great business.
And I also think we actually resent social mobility because of our yeah, I do. So many people who, if they come from a working class background and make it up, they say to you, who do you think you are, basically. There becomes a gulf between
who is this they and this we?
Lots of people I know that come from tough backgrounds, and even myself. When I got into the London School of Economics, there was a sense of, well, that's a different world. Who do you think you are? You should go and get a proper job. Lots of people.
From who? From people there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
From the academics or from the other students?
No, I mean from my background, from my family.
No, but that's inverse snobbery. That's one of the worst things in this country. And that idea that that if you want to make something of your life, like, ooh, who do you think you are? You want to. But most of my close friends and my husband, like people left school at 16 from working class backgrounds. My parents were first generation from working class backgrounds to go to university, and absolutely life changing. I think. I would say the vast majority of people I know have been of amazing examples of social mobility in this country. When people say it's dead in this country, rubbish. You work hard, you do the right stuff, you can get ahead in this country. Full stop.
Yeah, but I mean, when I talk to people who've made it to great jobs, and they talk about what their families say and where they come from, there is just a sense of who do you think you are, of peculiarity.
You've changed.
You've changed. Yeah, you're culturally different, and that often isn't fair. And I think it's a real shame about this country that actually there's a cynicism to people that want to get on. And I think
that's interesting.
I think a bit of the American optimism about that.
And the idea that anyone can grow up and be president. That idea. Okay, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How big an issue is that? Do you think that's part of what's holding us back in this country? I'm sort of blaming the leaders, but actually I'm wondering if part of that is that we hold ourselves back as well. I mean, there's definitely a thing, and that's linked to this polling of the red wall seats. There is definitely a very big issue in terms of expectations and aspirations in different parts of the country, and failings of schools in particular in a lot of these red wall areas, where low aspiration teachers, often some low aspiration parents, and things. And again, the criticism of people who say, for instance, want to send their kids to private schools when actually often they're just trying to buy them. We're not buying social aspiration. They just want to send their kids to a school where they're just going to aspire to the top grades, and they're going to be taught the top grade, and that's what I paid for. I literally just wanted to have my kid to be in a class where she could be taught to the top grade, so she had a chance of getting those grades. You cannot teach a bunch of kids who are getting E grades and C grades, A grade. So you can't teach them all at the same time. Doesn't work in any country. So it certainly doesn't. It's never worked in our country. But I'd love to know especially if you depending on your background, because I think social mobility is, and in both directions. I want those posh kids who are useless and lazy. I want them going down, because it should be about merit. But I think a lot of the time in this country we're not doing merit anymore, because it's all about like, oh, do you have the right sexuality or the right colour skin, the right religion, and now we're going to promote you above other people. So I want to talk about that with you. But get in touch. I want to hear your thoughts on what Benjamin had to say. 344 499 1000 is the number to call. What do you make of these NHS trusts fast-tracking ethnic minorities to top jobs?
Well, if any organisation in Britain is more representative of ethnic minorities and more diverse, it's the NHS. Often we talk about the fact that so many immigrants to this country work in the NHS, and so the idea that it's short of non-white staff in senior roles, in roles across the organisation, does seem peculiar to me. And I wonder whether this, it does strike me more as box ticking than as legitimate on this instance.
But in what scenario would it be legitimate? If there weren't many people who were of ethnic minority ethnicity, or background, would it then be okay? Is there this? I think people have been imbued with this idea that there must be a problem if people of a certain background, it's women, gay people, ethnic minorities, religions, if they are not in certain jobs, that must be a problem, and it must be something that is caused by something bad like racism, as opposed to demographic difference. I mean, for instance, you talk in people from Asian families, particularly Indian families or Chinese families, in terms of the jobs you are expecting, do massively well at school, massively well at universities. In fact, the people who were most hit by quotas for ethnic minorities in American universities were actually Asian kids from their backgrounds, where of course they were doing incredibly well. They actually had to get higher grades to get in, whereas black kids were having to get lower grades to get in, and white kids somewhere in the middle. I mean, again, I thought the whole thing was mad and wrong and immoral. But actually, a lot of those kids, they don't go into certain roles because they're not what's valued by their family and their background and their culture. So you go into law, you go into medicine, you go into certain other jobs, but you might not go into certain other industries or certain other professions. But there are cultural issues at play there.
Well, gay men run Britain, so there's no shortage of those.
That, yes.
But what I would say is that, in the NHS case, it just strikes me as slightly absurd. But you do have jobs where there are cultures that put people off applying for those jobs or being part of those communities, where they're old, straight and white. And, if a young black woman wanted to do the job, would they feel comfortable? Would they be encouraged to go forward? I think that's a valid question.
John Lewis had she was actually ended up being utterly useless, but they parachuted in I can't remember her name, but a black woman who had no track record in business, and what a surprise, did a terrible job. I know we're all shocked, but my God, those rainbow lanyards are out and about in full force in John Lewis and Waitrose, are they not? But this is the thing, I just don't think it does anyone any good. If anyone was saying to me, oh, you got your job because you're a woman, I'd be mortified. I'd be mortified. I don't want to not get a job because I'm a woman, but I also I don't think it helps women when you do that. I don't think it helps people from ethnic minority backgrounds or religions. I don't think it should be relevant. If you have to have a policy, whether it's in the police, we talked about that a lot in the last week, or in the NHS or in any other area where you are promoting people because of an ethnic minority over and above someone who's supposedly equal candidate who is white, you're basically saying, well, otherwise those people wouldn't get the job because obviously the people doing our recruiting are all racist. That's what you're basically saying. Why not just get rid of the racists if you think they're racist and just employ people? I would never, ever, 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 ever employ somebody because of the colour of their skin, whatever it was, or because of their gender, whatever it was.
Well, I mean, Liz Truss got in an all-women shortlist, so maybe you have a point.
But you look at most. I used to have a game when I was a political editor when Labour had all those of all-women shortlist back in '97. You could introduce me to a Labour MP, a woman Labour MP. I would be able to tell you within 5 minutes whether she'd come up on an all-women shortlist or not, because they were definitely lower quality.
Well, the Labour MP Dawn Butler sometimes says, she sometimes says, I want to have women MPs as rubbish as the male MPs, which is an interesting way of looking at it. But put it this way, when you talk about people getting into universities or whatever on slightly different grades, if someone comes from like a working class background,
that's relevant.
They go to a not good state comp and they get 4 A's at A level.
That's relevant.
I think they're probably cleverer than the guy at Eton who got 4 A's.
Yes, I completely agree. But that is a relevant factor. But the colour of their skin is not relevant. No, because you could be a Nigerian prince and be black, but you've had a privileged upbringing.
Yes, I mean, that's probably fair. I guess the real goal is that the chances are some of those ethnic minorities, especially a black boy in inner city London, probably has had a difficult start. But does the white working class boy get the same advantage? And I think that's probably
well, we
where
know the white working class boys are the ones who are most held back and are most disadvantaged, not young boys or girls of different ethnic minorities. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. I just thought when I was growing up, certainly by my 20s, I really thought we were in a position where people just had stopped talking about race because it wasn't interesting, it wasn't relevant, and racism we know from the stats absolutely plummeting as a viewpoint that was either acceptable or widely held. And now we've brought it back, and now we talk about race all the time. And the reason we do that is because we've got this supposed anti-racism, which is actually just another word for racism. And I don't think it does anyone any good. And I think the people it harms the most are actually people from some of the poorest backgrounds who are also ethnic minority. Those things not necessarily being the same thing, but I think it harms them the most.
Well, the richest ethnic group in Britain is Indians, who have done fantastically well, and actually they're a great example.
And one of the poorest is Pakistani. Well, I'm going to guess that most racists couldn't tell the difference between them.
That's true.
And yet somehow one group does well and one group doesn't. It's all down to family, it's down to culture, it's that belief in education, there's all these different, but it's all those different things. It's got sod all to do with race.
And Indians are a fantastic example of social mobility because lots of them, their parents or grandparents are the people that moved here, and they've had that discipline and that focus on work that has seen a considerable number do very well in Britain.
But when we see any particular group fair, it must be because of race, and we need to have quotas for people. I don't know why people think that helps. But anyway, your thoughts, very welcome. Let's also talk, just briefly, I want to talk about Sir Lindsay Hoyle. He's the Commons Speaker. Now, I've known Lindsay Hoyle for a long time, since just a backbench Labour MP. We've been very friendly for a long time. I am absolutely stunned, though, his racking up of travel expenses abroad since he's become Speaker. They've surged past 300 grand. In just a very short period, I mean, post the lockdown period, business class flights, 5-star hotels. He's often taking staff. It's not just him on his own. But a trip to Malaysia, a trip to Australia. Other trips. I don't really understand. I think I have this problem with John Bercow as well. I don't know why the Speaker of the House of Commons needs to be going on foreign trips on the taxpayer at all.
Yeah, it's not really an ambassadorial role. It's a very important role, but it's a quite straightforward one within our political system, not one that you think of as a global ambassador. £300,000 is a lot. I don't see why they would need to fly first class. You know, I mean, that's considerably more expensive even than business class if you were going to make the argument they need some privacy or something.
Well, you don't. I mean, you don't. I mean, I love, with all due respect to Lindsay and his wife, I really don't think they do.
And I'm not sure how many people overseas would recognise them, you know, on face value. But at the same time, I also resent the way that we seem to think that the cost of politicians doing business of representing Britain, whenever there's a story about the Foreign Secretary, for example, David Lammy, who's had over £1 million worth of trips, and I think, well, he's the Foreign Secretary.
It's the hypocrisy. That's the thing. It's both, and Ed Miliband as well. But you've got to remember that for years, as backbench MP and also Shadow Foreign Secretary, that David Lammy was criticising government officials who were the Tories for taking these flights, and including internal flights. Ed Miliband tells everyone else you shouldn't take in short-haul flights or internal flights. You should cut your carbon footprint, all that utter nonsense. And then he goes and takes a massive load of flights. He's not even the Foreign Secretary. He's not International Trade Secretary. He's Environment Secretary. Why the hell is he flying abroad on business at all anyway?
I mean, I suspect there's a lot of stuff to do with other countries and building those businesses and
really?
stuff.
I mean, again, lots of people manage with Zoom. But I mean, he doesn't. But they don't walk the walk. They talk the talk. You can't be Labour in opposition criticise the Tories for taking first class flights or using the Prime Minister's plane, and then literally a minute after getting into office do exactly the same and not expect criticism.
Well, the hypocrisy is a valid question, but I actually think I'm glad that we've got politicians that are flying around the world constantly trying to represent the country.
Well,
I think we could do with a bit more of that.
Angela Rayner, where was she? She was somewhere in Ethiopia. How have we all benefited from that?
I can't remember.
I mean, she wanted to go on a safari, was told by officials, no, this is an official trip. It doesn't involve a safari.
Africa's the country that... Africa's terrible. Africa's the continent, that's what I meant to say, that's expected to have the biggest growth this century. So people travelling and working with African countries, as I meant to say, is far more important.
And it's absolutely required. I mean, we don't have an ambassador over there. We don't have other people, other officials who could go there and do that work. We absolutely needed the Deputy Prime Minister to go there,
This is what I think is so embarrassing about this British mindset, that somehow that we should be smaller and quieter. No, we should be doing the grand trips when American politicians go to these countries and they make a big impact and they sit down with people.
What was the impact? What have we got out of it?
Well, I mean, you'd have to ask Angela Rayner
exactly.
that. But
I mean, don't we have a few things that she needs to be dealing with here?
Well, of course we do, but the idea that we shouldn't be doing these big trips, we shouldn't be making these connections, I think is slightly pathetic.
It depends.
Americans
I'm all in
favour
of a big trip, doing stuff that actually is going to do something. It's like when we hosted COP 4000. I mean, absolute abject nonsense, cost us a fortune, massive security. I mean, genuinely achieved achieved less than zero of net zero. Absolute waste of everyone's time. It was just pontificating hot air and nonsense. More hot air from bloody COP than there was from the blast furnace at Sunderland. Just finally, before we go to a break, I want to talk about genuinely this Blue Origin mission.
Yes.
This is Jeff Bezos's flight. This is the first. This is all terribly exciting. This is even more exciting than the first woman chancellor. Everybody, do hold on to your hats with excitement. The first all-female space crew in over 60 years. Katy Perry, along with Lauren Sanchez, who she happens to be the fiancée of the owner of Blue Origin. I don't know how she got on that flight. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? Journalist and TV presenter Gayle King, largely famous because she's Oprah Winfrey's best mate, a civil rights activist, a former rocket scientist and a filmmaker. They all got tarted up. They got their hair extensions sorted, got the makeup on, put these very tight blue suits on, and they went up into space. Genuinely, I was so embarrassed by this as a woman. I couldn't care less whether it's all women or not. And by the way, a lot of the people pushing this don't even know what a woman is. These are the same people who've got no issue with a man claiming he's a woman walking into a woman's toilet, so they can sod off for the start. But A, it's totally irrelevant. B, it was basically, who are these women? Why Katy Perry? Why the woman who shares a bed with the owner? Some TV. I mean, the screaming and the shrieking and the abject nonsense these women talked about as they fiddled with their hair extensions when they came back down. It was an embarrassment to women.
Would you do it? Would you go to space?
I absolutely do it.
Okay. Well,
I would absolutely do it. I probably would need hair extensions, though.
Well, I don't agree with you, so I might put up the first few grand for you to be off.
I hate to tell you, it's a bit more expensive. I would
20 million apparently.
If I was a millionaire, multi-millionaire, I would 100%. I'm not sure it's worth it to roll around for a few minutes, but it was embarrassing. They babbled abject nonsense when they came back down.
Well, the obsession with Katy Perry frustrated me because she was talking about God and daisies, and I thought, I just want to know what you saw. Like, just tell me what it's like.
I think we know what she saw.
Well, there was cameras inside. But actually, two of the people on there were NASA scientists. One of them, really amazing, a woman called Amanda, who had dreamed of going into space. She got into Harvard to study to be a NASA scientist, and she was assaulted, and she gave up her dream to try and change laws for women. And now she got to achieve it. That really moved me. So at least one of them properly deserved it.
Well, yeah. Well, I love your thoughts on that. I'm genuinely just embarrassed. Just put the telly on mute at that point. 11:25 is the time. Want to hear from you? 0344 499 1000. Hey, tell us, would you go into space? Love to hear that. All your thoughts, particularly on Broken Britain. What would you do to fix it? What's broken? What would you do to fix it? Crucially, this is Talk with the Home of Common Sense.
Trying to get them to adopt this Rooney rule, right? And it's come from American football.
Yes.
Okay. Where it says
it's got nothing to do with Wayne Rooney, which some people think
exactly.
it does.
Ethnic minorities have to be shortlisted for interviews, and they've got to make managers justify hiring white British people.
Yes.
The lunacy of it. You hire a white British person, and then you might be held to account and have to justify that. What a load of tripe.
I know. What a load of old tosh.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thanks for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth still with me as well. Lots of your calls coming in. Talk about Broken Britain. Lots of your messages too. Let's get to some of those. John says we have swathes of ethnic minorities not integrating. This, again, I don't think this is relevant, but people coming from a different cultural background, different heritage, not integrating, not speaking the language, not joining culturally, that is an issue. Some of these problems are so bad, says John, they're probably unsolvable now. Britain is dying by degrees. Mary says this is how we fix Britain. 1, all all illegal immigrants removed. Again, I don't know why people think that's a controversial policy. You're not here legally. We would expect to be removed if we were here. We're in a country illegally. Number 2, government's sole responsibility is to look after its citizens first. Yep. Number 3, work at making Britain great again. Scrap net zero, drill baby drill. Number 4, education, health, pensioners, veterans, invest in them properly. And number 5, stop giving money away overseas. A lot of those good. Barry says perhaps allowing free speech and debate would be a good start. Getting the basics right. That's right. That's why I go on about the free speech issue. You cannot have anything else without that protected free speech. Let's go to the phone lines. Georgia's on the line in London. Good morning to you, Georgina.
Good morning.
How are you, my love? How are you coping with this miserable weather in our capital city?
Do you know what? The day is what you make it. It doesn't matter what the weather's like outside. You wake up in the morning. If you're breathing, then that's a good day.
Oh, she's a positive one. It's like that line. It's like, there's no such thing as the wrong weather. It's the wrong clothing.
Well, that's what it is. Well, you're wearing some gorgeous clothing today. You look fabulous, as always. I've been listening to the conversation, as always, Julia. And yes, Britain is going down the pan rapidly. But you've got to think, the government we have in at the moment, they're here by default. When we threw the Tories out, which we did, because basically they had done us wrong. They had done us wrong.
But it was a vote against the Tories rather than for Labour when it came to the actual polling day, by the looks of it.
Well, exactly. Well, Labour was there. We've won by a huge majority and celebrating. But the fact of the matter is, if there had have been a horse in a hoop skirt who had a good party at that particular time, we'd have voted for them.
That's an image. I would definitely have voted for that.
Now, what you've got to think, money-wise, we are in debt up to our gunnels. But when you have got the likes of Ed Miliband flying, that is the key word here, around the world and telling us to go carbon neutral. Now that gets right up my nose.
Yep.
This man is spending extortionate money on a carbon neutral ideology that basically, if the rest of the world don't pull together with this, it is not going to happen. He needs China to get on that boat.
No, but either way, it's not going to make any difference. It just isn't going to make it. It is economic and defence-wise suicide. Simple as that.
Suicide. You're quite right. On top of that, we've got no freedom of speech in this country anymore. Keir Starmer can say what he likes. But when you've got people who are saying Christian prayers on the streets, getting arrested, that's telling me there's a problem.
There is an issue. There is an issue for me. Although she was in a buffer zone, was repeatedly asked to leave, and I do have an issue with people. Although she wasn't doing any harm, I think that's a very difficult one, though. Georgina, I'm going to leave it just right now because I want to get to another call. But I kind of say thank you, and thank you also for your compliments. I get more from you in an average week than I get from my husband. I'm not going to lie.
I'm just glad Georgina didn't go for me this week.
Yeah, that went quite viral, didn't it? But there we are. He loves it, really. They're talking about you. Let's go to Mark. Thank you, Georgina. Mark is in Lincolnshire. Mark, what do you want to say? What is broken? How do we fix it?
Hi there.
Hello.
Good morning, Julia, my duck. Morning.
I love a duck. That always cheers me up. What do you want to say?
I'll give Benjamin my duck as well.
Thank you.
You've made his week.
Thanks, Chuck.
Lovely job. Broken Britain. I mean, the thing, honestly, Julia, I find all of this chat so frustrating because people aren't talking about the central thing, really, that would actually fix the problems that we've got. And until we actually address it, nobody's going to fix anything. And that's obviously immigration. Yeah. We cannot escape that fact. Now, the reality is, unless we're in such a bad position as a consequence of decades of, excessive open border policies, where we have millions and millions of people who really shouldn't be here, who under normal circumstances would not have been here because they're not creating enough wealth, they're not creating enough tax, etc., etc. They're more of a burden than they are a help to the nation. They should not be here. Obviously, people that are overstaying visas, of which there's probably in excess of 1 million people in this country that have overstayed their visa.
Bye. Bye. I would literally say you've got a month to leave the country, otherwise the penalties are going to be very severe. Bye.
100%, Julia. because we can't keep going on in this situation. You cannot fix the NHS. You cannot fix housing. You cannot fix any of our infrastructural issues unless you deal with that one central problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because all you're doing, it's like, you know, a lot of people, I get really disheartened when I hear people that are, you know, where Reform are polling at 30%. According to, wasn't it Harry from The Sun earlier on. Yeah, that disheartens me because they're not going to fix the problem. Yes, they may well stop the boats, but that doesn't fix anything. They're not going to address the problem that exists.
The visas and that. Yeah, I mean, no party seems to be on top of that, do they? Mark, so appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking to Alan Mendoza from the Henry Jackson Society about extremism behind bars for that horrific attack on 3 prison officers. What is the solution? This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:37 is the time. Let's talk about extremism behind bars with Dr. Alan Mendoza. He's Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Very, very good morning to you.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. And we saw this extraordinary story of this attack on 3 prison officers. I mean, it's an absolute miracle that certainly 2 of them, one stabbed in the face, the throat, one in the back, another also seriously injured, actually survived. But we understand now the hate preacher Anjem Choudhury is suspected of having inspired this terror attack behind bars by Hashim Abedi. He's the brother of the man who actually set off that bomb and killed himself at the Manchester Arena in 2017, and obviously a huge number of other people as well, including young girls. But his brother was also a plotter. He's behind bars. He's already attacked another prison officer, and yet he was bizarrely left free to make his own food and attend the prison kitchen, was able to fashion a knife and to get hold of hot oil. What do you make of this story and the idea that he might have been actually inspired by a hate preacher also behind bars with him?
Well, the latter is entirely possible because Abedi and indeed Choudhury were in a separation unit where they are kept away from other prisoners, but where they can socialise with one another. And indeed, they get all kinds of perks. They can have their cooking, they can play games consoles. They have quite a cushy life, apart from obviously not being able to circulate freely with everyone else. But it does mean that there's a very dangerous atmosphere within that separation unit, because these are the worst cases, the most extreme radicalised prisoners are kept there. And you can be certain, as we saw with the case of Abedi, they haven't changed their minds about things, and they will seize any opportunity to attack prison officers or do whatever damage they can do within the prison.
Yeah.
And that, of course, does extend even. Their presence does have a radicalising effect beyond their walls, even though they can't directly meet with other people. So it's a very problematic setting. And this case, once again, shows that things are going badly wrong in our prisons.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Ian Atchison, who's been regularly on the show, he's a former prison governor, and he's advised the governor on how to deal with extremists behind bars. He's recommended that these units were set up to basically isolate dangerous Islamist terrorists from the rest of the prison community because of that. But then, bizarrely, they were given these sort of, basically these extra perks of being allowed to cook their own meals. I mean, it's quite absurd. The families of many of the victims that Manchester Arena attack, essentially, these people should be held behind bars in a cell 23 hours a day and allowed out only for exercise. Well, they say people are saying with one prison officer. I wouldn't want to be that prison officer, I have to say. But actually, we need to understand that prison's about punishment. These are dangerous men. There is no evidence that people can be converted back from this level of extremist violence abuse. Every time that we're told that has happened, it has been proven not to happen. It puts people more at risk. Is that the answer?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head here, Julia. The reality is that these people are so steeped in radical Islamist ideology, so convinced of their own mad worldview, they're never going to be brought back. No de-radicalization process is going to bring these people back. And, it's not a question of punishing them per se. They will not come out of prison anyway, these people now, given the length of time they're serving. But the question has to be, why should they be allowed any privileges?
Yeah.
They should be kept in very strict conditions, commensurate to the crimes they have committed, and that they would commit again, crucially, Julia. That's the thing to remember here. And they should not be given the kind of privilege. And it tells you a lot about the, frankly, woke mentality of many prisons that this sort of thing is happening.
And that's part of the issue, isn't it? And we know the prison service is basically, it is an absolute crisis. We know there's been a massive lack of funding. It's one of the reasons why we had a load of people let out of prison last autumn, way before their prison sentences. But we know that's why we've got this absurd policy of people being let out halfway through their sentences. And quite bizarre policies, I think, in most people's views. And we know there's a massive shortage of prison officers. Often prisoners are kept behind bars in their cells, 23 hours a day. They're not doing anything useful, out of their heads on skunk. And basically, prison officers allowing that to happen because there isn't really any alternative that they can see. But it is interesting also how it does appear that prison guards who are still there have lost control. The governors have lost control. Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, pointed out today that 45% of prisoners at one UK jail, that's HMP Whitemore, now identify as Muslim. Now, the vast majority of those were not Muslims when they went into the prison. They've been converted while inside. And there's this phrase, convert or get hurt. It's something that Tommy Robinson, a.k.a. Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, has spoken about many times. He's in solitary confinement while he's in prison. He's not a political prisoner. He broke the law. He's quite rightly behind bars. But he's having to be kept in solitary confinement because he basically will be a target of Islamist extremist gangs. But ordinary prisoners are routinely now being forced to convert to Islam or pretend they've converted to Islam so that they can maintain their own safety behind bars. That is unacceptable, isn't it?
Well, it's a dire situation. It's unacceptable is just the polite way of saying it. It's a truly disastrous situation that radical Islamists are getting hold of prisoners, vulnerable prisoners in many cases, and turning them to a very dangerous form of Islam that could then, lead to further problems once these prisoners come out, if they've been radicalized and brought into a very extreme form of Islam in this way. The second problem with this is that it shows that prison officers have indeed lost control of prisons. There was a move. Here's a well-known phenomenon, Julio. It's well known that this has been a process going on for the last 10, 15 years. Yeah. And there was a period when, prison governors looked quite kindly on this, thinking, a bit of religion will be a good thing. It'll keep people under control, fine. But they did not understand that this was not benign Islam. This was radical Islam. It is anything but a very safe thing to be bringing people into. It'd be one thing if they were into Sufi Islam, for example, spirituality, but this is not what is happening. And so as a result, you're seeing a radicalization within the prison population. Prison governors initially co-opted these people along the grounds of, it'll make life easier. It turns out, of course, it doesn't make life easier. It means that you're giving power to a certain group of prisoners who then exert greater control over other prisoners. And then you have this hierarchy within prisons that then will challenge the status quo, not simply in the prison, but beyond in society once they come out. out.
And most of them will come out.
Yeah.
OK, so what do we do about it? Because we haven't got enough prison officers, we haven't got a lot of experienced prison officers. They're paid very low pay. I don't know why anyone would do a job where they've got the chance of being stabbed in the face or the throat by a prisoner. They've got, I mean, the conditions they're being forced to endure in their workplace, no one else would accept. How do we deal with it?
So again, this is the problem, isn't it? You've got to feel sorry for prison officers. They face a terrible situation. But part of the problem isn't it, that they have simply not been empowered by the state. In fact, they've been depowered by the state. The state has told them for years, oh, you can't do anything bad to prisoners. You know, we don't want anything bad to happen, but you're not allowed to be tough with them.
Yeah.
You have to be kind. You have to show them every consideration, all the rest in this sort of way. And there is, of course, a case at the lower end that you don't want to be tough with prisoners. You want to rehabilitate prisoners.
And many mental health problems.
Is for. Exactly, and those things need to be handed out. But at the higher end, the people who are the gang leaders, the people who are in for very serious crimes, they should be having the book absolutely thrown at them. They should be punished severely.
But
the state should
a lot of people, it seems to me, in the prison service and the justice service and across the board, probation and others, they don't really think that prison is about punishment. It's about rehabilitation. I think for the vast majority of people in this country, the number one point of prison is punishment. Second, and it's very much related to punishment, is deterrence. And dealing with rehabilitating people is very much a secondary issue.
Well, it is and it isn't. The rehabilitation thing is very important for those people who have only just touched the sort of the extremes of the criminal web. You don't want to have a situation. I mean, prisons are all famously known as universities of crime. If you keep people in for no particular purpose, you end up simply criminalising them further. Yeah. There is a purpose for rehabilitation in prisons, and we don't do that well either. Our problem is we really have the worst of all worlds. Yeah. We do rehabilitation really badly at the lower end. We try and mollycoddle the upper end, and as a result, we have this perfect mess of conditions where, as you say, who would want to be a prison officer? But it starts from the state. The state has to give the direction. The previous government failed in this. The current government is failing with this. And if we don't get a handle on it, we are going to fail yet another generation of not only the people in the prisons, but the people who then they come and hurt when they come out of prison.
Absolutely. Can I ask you finally, we're asking people today about the front page of the Sun observation polls showing that 2/3 of voters in red wall seats, the ones that famously went for Boris Johnson, from Labour to Boris Johnson in 2019, but back to Labour this time around, that they are saying that Britain is broken, is heading in the wrong direction. We've had a caller earlier, Stuart, actually, in the last hour, talking about how Britain's gone too soft on everything. That's what he thinks is the problem. What do you think has gone wrong with Britain, and what can we do to fix it?
Well, I think the caller who said we've gone too soft is sort of has got the essence of what the problem is. For too long, we've allowed basically problems to fester. We have thought, if we deal with problems in a very calm and kind way, we will end up bringing solutions that everyone can rally around, and that's a way to go forward. And we have not been decisive as a result. Now, I think there's always a place for calm thinking. There's always a place for being calm and cool and collected about something. But we need to have a return to some sense of leadership in the country. The previous government was kicked out of office because it failed to provide that leadership. This government promised leadership, and it's ended up having to U-turn on half a dozen things, within a year of being in office.
Indeed.
Where is the leadership? That's a question, Julia. And that part of that is, we've been too soft on issues that have been allowed to fester for too long. And that you can go across the board on that. Look at British Steel, for example.
Yeah, I know. That thing is interesting how many people are making that point. Dr. Alan Mendoza, great to talk to you, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you so much for that. 11:47 is time. We'll take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about why is Donald Trump blaming Volodymyr Zelensky for the invasion of his country by Trump's big mate, Vladimir Putin. We'll talk about that up next with Hamish de Bretton Gordon. This is Talk.
people really dislike hypocrisy. People really dislike grotesque waste, and this is really grotesque waste, especially when he's telling working families, you know, people who have to scrimp and save to take their children on holiday once a year, flying economy. The message is that, oh, you're going to be shamed if you do that. You really shouldn't do that. But he knows better because he's our green saviour.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth's here. Get his thoughts just a few moments, what my next guest has to say. But what I really want to know right now is why on earth is Donald Trump blaming Volodymyr Zelensky because his country was invaded by Vladimir Putin? That appears to be what he's done. The US president and the Ukrainian leader shared the blame with President Putin for millions of people dead in the Ukraine war. He says you don't start a war against someone 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles. That's what he said to reporters at the White House. He also blamed the former US President Joe Biden for the conflict. He's always said if he'd been in power, this would never have happened. Let's talk to Hamish de Bretton Gordon, OBE, former British Army Colonel, about this. Good morning to you, Hamish.
Hi, good morning, Julia.
Leaving aside the fact that Donald Trump and many of his acolytes keep using this phrase about millions of dead. I mean, no, not millions of dead. It's in the low hundreds of thousands. It's too many people dead. Most of those, by the way, being Russian soldiers sent into the meat ground by Vladimir Putin. But how on earth is Zelensky to blame for the Russian president invading his country?
Well, it's pretty incongruous, isn't it, Julia, that this should be the case. And as you said, you know, the casualties involved here. I think it's, I genuinely think Donald Trump is really trying very hard to get a peace and a ceasefire. And perhaps he'll talk about his obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize, maybe part of that. But I think what he's getting absolutely no change out of Putin at the moment. Putin thinks he's winning. Putin's happy to crack on. And even, you know, Steve Witkoff, who was in St. Petersburg with Putin the other day, sort of giving him faint praise. And even the attack on Sumy over the weekend that killed 34 Ukrainian civilians, Trump couldn't even come to say that was the wrong thing to do. So I think he's trying to put additional pressure on Zelensky. So he thinks Zelensky is the one who's going to give. And let's face it, Zelensky's agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. Putin has agreed with so many caveats that actually it doesn't really matter. So I think he's just trying to put pressure on Zelensky.
Yeah, there's no more that Zelensky can offer other than have my entire country, rape every Ukrainian woman and abduct every Ukrainian child. You know, fill your boots, Vladimir Putin. I mean, I don't know how much more you can expect him to offer. Look, I've got no faith in this Steve Witkoff guy. I don't think being a golfing buddy and having done a few property deals in New York makes you someone who can carry out these sort of level negotiations. My guess is Putin is running rings around him as much as he's running rings around Donald Trump. But it is very, very worrying, this. Again, he's not in any way sort of, you know, trying to be an honest broker between the two sides. And a lot of people say, yeah, they'd like the war to end. But the war could end. There would be a point at which the war could end if a deal had been done. OK, so Russia keeps a lot of the land it's taken. It's got 20% of Ukrainian territory, but with a 100% guarantee from America and the Europeans that not an inch more will be taken, or it is all-out war between NATO and Vladimir Putin. That could end the war, but he doesn't want to give that guarantee.
It does seem absolutely incongruous, Julia, because if the war stopped today, the Europeans, actually led by Britain at last, are prepared to put troops on the ground to enforce and hold a ceasefire, and pretty much Putin would be where he is. But Trump doesn't seem to want to go there. And you just wonder why. I mean, Putin has always said he wants to subjugate the whole of Ukraine. Yeah. But again, can Trump really allow that to happen and destabilise Europe completely?
Can we really stop it from happening? Because one of the things that Donald Trump has been absolutely right about, and he said stuff in his first term as well, and he was laughed at. He was laughed at by the Western media, laughed at by Western leaders in Europe when he said, it's time for Europe to pay their own way. People thought it was outrageous. He said, I don't see why NATO's umbrella should extend to countries not paying their fair dues to NATO. facto, as agreed, in a binding treaty. I thought he was quite right about that. It is a good thing that Western Europe has had a wake-up call that actually we need to start funding our own defences. That is one very good thing that's come out of this.
No, I think so, absolutely, and he has galvanised us, and I think the European NATO countries now, or will certainly have the power to hold back Putin in the long run, and actually it's making us much less reliant on the States going forward. So a bit of an unintended consequence, I expect, for Trump going forward, when we won't be worshipping at his altar in future for his military power.
Except we will always really need it, because we're not prepared to spend the serious money that America has been spending. One thing I want to ask you, and I'm fascinated by this, is why do you think Donald Trump is, I mean, certainly in conversations you and I have had together on many of these different issues, he's so sound on Israel. He completely gets that Israel is the victim of Hamas and not the perpetrator of genocide in Gaza. But he doesn't get the reality and the truth of the situation with Ukraine, and that Ukraine is the victim and Russia is the perpetrator. Do you think that he genuinely doesn't get it? And if so, why?
Well, dare I say, politics are involved in this, and certainly when it comes to the Israeli vote in the US, it's obviously very, very important.
Well, the Jewish vote, it's the Jewish vote.
Sorry, the Jewish vote. But of course, Europe, and we know from JD Vance and others, the view of Europe that's held in the White House at the moment, and I think stand fast the UK. I think Trump's view of Europe is pretty dim as well. But to allow it to influence his thinking in such an important thing of war and peace in Europe, it is pretty shocking. And I suppose the final thing here, Julia, as you've alluded to, he is trying to do a deal. Unfortunately, deals in real estate are different from deals in peace and war.
Who knew?
And there doesn't seem to be anybody around him who he will listen to and act on.
Well, my worry is he spends an awful lot of time spouting what is clearly sort of Kremlin bots on the internet. Again, the millions of deaths and things like that. This is something that's being spouted by the MAGA crew. It is simply untrue. No one sensible is claiming this. It's a made-up number. Why does the president keep claiming millions have died when they haven't?
I don't know. Well, it's difficult to see what that would get there. Yeah. I think, again, it's trying to force Zelensky and the Ukrainian people to sort of capitulate where they are and go for peace. I think it makes him look stupid, and it makes me my thing is, if you're getting that information from the internet, well, what other information are you getting from the internet as opposed to from actual facts? It's a bit of a worry. Hamish Breton Gordon, thank you as always for talking to us. Benjamin Bustworth still with us. What do you make of this? I mean, look, again, I do not suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. I praise him when I think he's doing something right, and I criticise him when I think he's doing something wrong. But blaming Zelensky, the leader of country, I mean, for an invasion of his country by Putin is absurd, isn't it?
It is, and you wonder how someone who is clearly as very intelligent as Donald Trump is can miss the blatantly obvious and yet see it in the Israeli example.
So does he actually think this, or do you think he's saying it?
It's very hard to predict. If I knew that, I might be considerably richer, because the whole world is trying to work that one out on just about everything he says. I think what he always wants is headlines, and needless to say, this gets headlines. But when he went into the election, he said he would solve this in 100 days.
I think he said a day originally.
He did a day originally, yeah, but when he got a bit more serious, he said 100 days. Now we're on something like day 90 now, roughly. And so I think he's gone in there with a position of, I just need to stop this thing happening. And
on whatever terms.
Exactly.
But he's made it clear to Putin that he's on a deadline, which is not a deadline that Putin cares about, because Putin doesn't care if it were the truth that millions had died. He does not care. He's a psychopath.
Precisely, exactly. And I guess if you handed Ukraine over, you would end the war, but that's not peace, that's control. And nobody in the Western world besides Donald Trump is going to accept that. Do
you think Britain, France and the others, because the coalition of the willing has gone remarkably quiet, is actually willing? And at the end of the day, I still get people calling in saying it's not our war. Yeah, but it could very quickly become our war. And if you seriously think that Vladimir Putin is stopping in Ukraine, you need your head rattled.
Exactly. Moldova might have something to say that, which is incredibly
and also NATO countries, EU countries that we have a duty of care to and have promised. And we have a duty of care to Ukraine. We were part of that original treaty where they handed over their nuclear weapons, that we would support their right to maintain sovereignty as an independent nation state. Well, I don't think we should sign treaties we're not willing to back up.
Absolutely, and this could happen in so many other places if we let it happen here.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed for that. Lots more coming up in the next hour or so. More from Benjamin Butterworth. Up next, Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. We're also going to be taking more of your calls on a broken Britain. Why is it broken? What would you do to fix it? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week, the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Hopefully you already knew that. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube on your connected device, thank you very much indeed for your company. Also, still joined by journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, having a very lively set of discussions. I like the fact that you and I often disagree and agree. There's a little, there are moments in between, aren't there? So much to talk about in this hour. Bin workers in Birmingham voted to reject what they called a totally inadequate offer from the City Council aimed at ending this long-running strike over pay. On-off strikes since the beginning of January, complete all-out strikes since the beginning of March. Unite is warning that this is the biggest trade union, one of the biggest trade unions in the country. They're warning this could lead to a series of nationwide strikes across the country as more pay disputes, very similar to the row in Birmingham, move on. It's also been revealed that Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband encouraged Chinese involvement in key parts of the UK's critical infrastructure less than a month before the government wrested control of British Steel from its Beijing shareholders. I know. So turns out we can't trust Ed Miliband on anything. Who knew? Plus, Labour is accused of a fresh Brexit betrayal last night over plans to drag Britain back under the rule of EU judges. Ministers are believed to have accepted what they call dynamic alignment with Brussels standards on food and agricultural imports. Dynamic alignment is another phrase for basically following EU rules. Plus, the NHS trusts that are fast-tracking ethnic minorities to top jobs to meet diversity quotas. At least 11 major hospital trusts in England are running schemes focused on helping ethnic minority employees to gain promotions to senior roles. but why on earth do they need to be fast-tracked? We'll talk about that, plenty more besides, lots more coming up. Do you want to get to more of your calls coming in about the poll for the front page of The Sun today? A surveyation poll carried out of voters in the red wall seats in the Midlands, North West, North East. And basically, these are the seats that were Labour to a T and then went massively blue for Boris Johnson in 2019 with a Get Brexit Done manifesto pledge. Also, of course, small point of Jeremy Corbyn being leader of the Labour Party at the time. Well, it looks like those voters are heading to other parties, in particular to Reform UK, according to the poll. Some voters there saying they're basically favouring Reform even over Labour. But crucially, also 2/3 of voters in those red wall seats say they believe Britain is broken and is heading in the wrong direction. I want to know what's wrong with Britain and what would you do to fix it? Number to call 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. You can also, of course, send us a message on our YouTube page. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Benjamin Butterworth, just want to come back to you just first in terms of these bin strikes. What should the council do? We've had the union who rejected this deal. What should happen next?
Well, one of the problems is apparently there are enough managers that should clear this, but they're trying to use the union laws, and also they mentioned earlier, your guest said that the two neighbouring councils have suggested they could help, but that would be breaching the picket.
They're Tory, yeah, but I mean, there's no. Is that? But that's. I mean, that might be something that would upset the Unite Union, because this is a local Tory councillor in Birmingham saying that it was local Tory councils nearby have said we can help you with your refuse collections. They haven't even had a response, they say, to. From the Birmingham City Council, which of course is Labour run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're talking about really quite a small number of people's jobs here and a relatively modest amount of money for each of them.
Well, that's always the same with rail strikes as well, when hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, even millions of people could be affected because of a pay dispute that affects a few thousand workers. This is actually, we think it may be 150 workers, it may be a couple of dozen or even less than that workers.
And I think this is where there becomes a question about, I believe in trade unions and the right to strike, but actually what you've got here is a very small number of workers who, I assume in this day and age, it's not appallingly behaved, otherwise maybe I share their sentiment, and they're holding huge numbers of workers to ransom, trying to go about their daily lives, trying to be safe. Imagine if you're a kid in one of these streets with rats running around and piles of rubbish. I mean, that's dangerous. It's Dickensian. And so, frankly, if I were the council, I'd be tempted to pay some private providers to come in and clear it up and then sack the lot of them.
I mean, I'm quite surprised to hear that from you, as will, I'm sure, my next guest, Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Good afternoon to you, Mark. Are you surprised to hear Benjamin, Mr Lefty, talking about sacking the workers out on strike and bringing in private contractors?
Always a delight to agree with Benjamin, Julia, on these sort of economic policies. I do agree with him. I mean, we've got ourselves into a colossal problem in Birmingham. The Unite Union are saying it could spread elsewhere. I would have thought if you're a local council of whatever partisan persuasion, you might very well be thinking that if you're signing a deal to get refuse collected in your neck of the woods, you want a no-strike agreement to be part of the deal, or at least a minimal strike agreement. I don't know, you can strike 1 day in 7 or some such like, but an all-out strike, signing a contract that allows that, well, look what it's brought us to, complete disaster. So I would have thought the way out of this is something along the lines that Benjamin has suggested. But over the long term, I think we've got to make sure that workers, especially if we're talking about a dozen or a few dozen jobs, not even at stake, pay rises for those jobs at stake, well, let's in future strike deals which do not allow this sort of all-out strike action.
And that's the thing. And again, it's kind of it's similar again to transport workers, and who are able to go and strike and hold governments to ransom. And then of course Labour just come in and go, here you have a nice big pay rise. And then of course you've got police and soldiers who are not allowed to strike for a reason, because we need it. If you work in the critical job at essential personnel, as Al Murray, the pub landlord, calls them, then actually there is an impact on the people that is far greater. What do you make of this is what we were told by a Tory councillor in Birmingham City Council. He said he verified it this morning that 2 local Tory-run councils nearby had said, we can send our refuse trucks in, we can come and help you. They haven't even had a response from Labour-run Birmingham City Council.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, you start to question in whose interests is Birmingham City Council being run. It doesn't look like it's being run in the interests of Birmingham ratepayers. They're dealing with, what is it now, more than 20,000 tonnes of rubbish across
I think it's more than that.
flats.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So I'm afraid they're giving the impression that the council's being run in the interest of the Unite Union rather than the interest of ratepayers. I mean, I'm amazed it's taken this long. You would have thought that Birmingham City Council would have leapt into action rather earlier to find support from neighbouring municipalities or to find some private refuse collection company that could at least mitigate the damage. I mean, obviously negotiations can be ongoing, but they've got an obligation to try and get this litter off the streets. It's a major task, but it's not that.
Birmingham is looking properly third world at the moment. I don't know how
fourth world, worse than third world.
Well, indeed, and the biggest worry, of course, that this could spread elsewhere because a lot of the issues that Birmingham City Council has been wrestling with financially are also issues that affect other councils as well. Let's talk about something completely different. Let's talk about Sunderland and that steel plant that has been taken into basically not nationalised as such, but certainly public control, if not ownership, at the current time. It's now emerged that Labour had backed Chinese investment in critical UK infrastructure, as indeed the Tories have done. I mean, certainly Cameron and Osborne. I mean, literally, like, let Chinese come in, buy everything. Huawei, be involved with Huawei. And then Chinese involvement in critical infrastructure, like our water firms, like nuclear power stations, you name it, they've been involved. But it's interesting, the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, and she's encouraged Chinese involvement in key parts of UK's critical infrastructure less than a month before the government wrested control of British Steel from its Beijing shareholders amid lots of concern that they were deliberately running down the plant, partly so that because obviously we know every Chinese firm is beholden to the Chinese government. That is the law of the Chinese land. That actually they wanted to basically, Britain won't be able to make virgin steel anymore. We will actually basically have to rely on China. What do you make of this? So many politicians of pretty much every political hue happy to quite literally kowtow to the Chinese.
Yeah, we've got the West has got to completely reset its relationship with China. We want some form of trading relationship, obviously. I'm not suggesting we should have a blockade on all Chinese goods and services. But we've not drawn a very clear line about what's within scope, what sort of Chinese products might we buy because they're cheap and reliable, and what's out of scope that we fear might fall into the hands of those who effectively are agents for the Chinese Communist Party. A complete muddle about this. And I would have thought that the government needs a pretty clear list of here are a range of sectors or industries or projects which we will either ensure are commissioned only domestically or to allied nations. Perhaps we'd be okay with the Norwegians or the Americans or the Dutch contributing to our energy supply, but not the Chinese, for example. But we've never drawn that line. And I still think we've got this hangover from way back in the 80s and 90s, the Deng Xiaoping era, that if only China sort of embraced capitalism and markets, which it has to some extent, sooner or later, probably sooner, it will become a free country. Well, there's no sign of that happening. That prediction was completely wrong.
It was going to bring them in from the cold, wasn't it? And it really didn't. But is in particular interesting, Ed Miliband, he's touted his insane net zero policies. And by the way, Keir Starmer, last Tory government, and Keir Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister, are responsible for this. Ed Miliband does his master's bidding. So, lots of people calling for his head, but these are policies of all the major parties. But I have to say, apart from Reform UK, and Kimmy Badenoch actually is now weighing back on it, but not on the actual idea of achieving net zero. But he's always said, we have to achieve net zero. We have to get more renewable fuels energy, so we don't rely on these sort of petrostate dictators who we rely on for oil. Now, of course, we get most of our oil actually and our gas from America, from allies in the like Qatar, but also crucially from Norway. We actually don't get our oil and our gas from these petrostate dictators. But he does want us to buy our solar panels and our wind turbines and rely on apparently steel and goodness knows what from China, which is a literal dictatorship.
No, that's right. I mean, I think the picture's even bleaker than the one you just paint, Julia. We're not bothering to access our own natural resources of oil and shale gas and the like. So,
we import 60% of our gas. It's terrifying.
It's absolutely ludicrous. And coal, for God's sake, Ed Miliband was, suggesting, we've moved on now, we're closing down the last coal mines. So I think we've had to ship in a whole ton of coal from Japan to get this furnace up and running again. I mean, this is absurd. Even if you are a carbon net zero addict and believe that's the way to go, I certainly don't. But even if you are, why on earth do you think Japanese coal is green, but British coal isn't?
So I must correct myself. We import 60% of steel. That's it. And steel, not gas, but we import a huge amount of our gas as well. Just want to correct myself. I know the net zero crew are big on facts, but we like to be big on them on this show. But this is the thing. It is painful. There was an interesting conversation on Today programme this morning. I always say I flip around. I've got Mike Graham on. I've got a bit of this, got a bit of that on. I like to flip in between, mainly because I just get too frustrated with anything too much from the mainstream. But I was interested. There was a conversation. I had hopes with Nick Robinson. They were talking about about the high energy costs that made steel production in this country such a problem. And they mentioned green tariffs. They got as far as that, but at no point did they manage to get to the, as with conversations with a shadow minister only yesterday, the elephant in the room, which is the reason why you can't make energy cost efficient and a profit in this country, can't make steel, is because of our high energy prices.
No, that's right. I mean, if we are going to have high energy prices, largely because of our green policies, I mean, there are other things as well. We've got terrible planning policies, for example. So energy in the UK is, 4 times the cost of the United States of America? I mean, good luck competing with the USA if you're in a high energy intensity industry.
Yeah. Or indeed most of Europe. Our costs are 50% more than Europe as well.
So we've got to try and get those costs down. Carbon net zero, in my view, is an exercise in economics suicide. The Chinese government will gladly assist us if we want to partake in economic suicide. So don't be surprised that they are doing so. We've got to get energy costs down. And the sorry tale of British Steel, if you've made steel manufacturing completely uneconomic, such that you can't turn any sort of profit on it, then businesses aren't going to be interested. And you can sort of see this applying to a whole range of sectors. I mean, at what point are we going to nationalise the pub industry, right? We're going to ban banter and bad jokes in pubs. We've already banned smoking in pubs. Have we banned...
they'll ban booze in pubs next.
Right, so at some point, pubs will not be able to run officially in the market. There'll be a call to nationalise pubs. If you make it impossible to run businesses, unfortunately, you get into this position where nationalisation is the only option because you've made the sector completely unviable in the open market. That's where we've got to on steel. So longer term, we've got to unravel all of that backdrop.
That links into my final question, actually, because this poll that's commissioned by the Sun, the Survation poll of red wall voters, those voters, as I said, who went from the Labour to Tory and now looking, it turns out, mostly back to looking so from Labour to Tory and then back to Labour, now looking like they're going to reform UK, according to this poll. 2/3 of those voters believe that Britain, they say, is heading in the wrong direction and is broken. I want to know from you, we're asking our audience today, what do you think is wrong with Britain? Is it broken? And what would you do to fix it?
Yeah, Julia, nothing works in Britain, or at least that's the impression. I'm surprised that poll only shows 68% thinking Britain is broken. Who are the 32% who think everything's going fine?
I know. I'm always fascinated by those people. Tell us why. What wonderful bubble of joy and unicorns and rainbows are you living in?
Hard to imagine, isn't it? Here's what I think's gone wrong, though. We've allowed to develop in Britain over many years on a gentle low simmer a whole real shift in the way we govern this country. We've now got north of 400 different quangos who are effectively in control of policy on a day-to-day basis, much more than our elected politicians. We've now got a politicised judiciary. I think if you want to impact immigration policy in Britain, you're probably better to become a judge than an immigration minister. And we have therefore sort of chipped away at parliamentary democracy. So people keep voting for things, such as, for example, radically reduced immigration, and they don't happen. People, I think, got a pretty clear idea of the sort of Britain they want, but their voices are not listened to. And Parliament after Parliament either is incapable of implementing the desires and demands of the British people, or is undermined when it attempts to do that. So my recipe would be, let's get back to good old-fashioned free debate and parliamentary democracy. Let's completely empower our politicians. I know politicians are not a particularly loved class of people, but at least you can get rid of them, unlike
It's the reason why we campaign for Brexit, which is our next topic, actually. Exactly.
Exactly right. So we've got to get back to the way that we ran Britain about 25 years ago. That's not a guaranteed route to a land of milk and honey, but I think it is a guaranteed route out of this disaster of nothing basically working and us all feeling we're back in the 1970s.
Yeah, and feeling powerless about it. And that's my crucial thing. I never thought that, land of milk and honey after Brexit was delivered. But for me, it was like, again, we can punish the people who don't do what they were told to do. And that's exactly what people did at the last general election. They made it very, very clear. We're not happy, you're out. And this government, if you're not doing what you can talk a good game on smashing the gangs and sorting the NHS out and this. If you don't do what the voters have told you to do, you're going to be out too. And eventually, one hopes we'll get a government, I don't care of whatever hue, that actually does the things that the British people have asked them to do. But that is what democracy is about.
Yes, I think that's right. But I think what we've really seen, since 1997, is we've changed the management quite a few times, but not the system. And I wonder whether the penny's dropping that simply changing the management and the personnel within our broken governmental system, it's really not enough.
Do we need
to change the way government works?
Well, exactly. Do we need to do, Elon Musk style Doge clear outs of top management, top civil servants? I mean, they certainly ain't world class, and they're certainly not servants anymore.
Yeah, I think we should consider whether the top rank of civil servants, perhaps the top 2,000 or 3,000 permanent secretaries, director generals and directors, should be political appointees and attached to the programme of the government of the day, rather than pretend they're independent. And all of these quangos, I think they should either be abolished, privatised, or brought wholly within ministerial control.
Yeah.
And until we get that done, it doesn't really matter whether it's Team Red or Team Blue who you elect, because the country will be run in large part by the quangocrats, not by the MPs we put into Parliament.
And again, I thought that was so exemplified by the Sentencing Council and their plan to basically have two-tier justice in terms of sentencing, unless people from a designated minority. And even the Justice Secretary didn't want it, the Shadow Justice Secretary didn't want it, but had no powers to overrule it. But they've agreed to delay it. They haven't actually got rid of it. It is extraordinary. Why on earth would an unelected group of people get to have a say over the sentencing guidance? Unelected judges, yes, to actually carry out individual sentencing of individual offenders, but it is quite bizarre that we've got ourselves into that. Climate Change Committee, you name it.
Yeah, and on the sentencing issue, what was the response of the Justice Secretary? She certainly gave the impression that at the time she didn't even realise this guidance had been issued.
Yep.
And then the response was, I'm absolutely appalled by this. What I'm going to do is to write a very stiff letter.
Yes.
You've got to have rather more powers in ministers of the Crown than that.
Yeah.
I think the Sentencing Council is just one example of many bodies that should be wholly abolished, or if the Justice Secretary wants people to advise on how sentencing guidance should change, that's fine. They should be fully embedded in the Ministry of Justice
and then accountable
report to the Secretary of State.
Who is accountable to, guess who? Us. Mark Littlewood, always good to talk to you, Director of Popular Conservatism. Thank you very much indeed for that. Benjamin Butterworth, you come from a very different political side of the debate from Mark Littlewood. You're from the left, you're a Remainer, but shouldn't this be something we should all agree on? Again, freedom of speech, accountable government, elected officials making decisions and them being actually enacted by the people who are supposedly apolitical civil servants. Crucial word, servants. And they should be doing that. And we are not seeing that anymore.
Well, even Keir Starmer has said this. Since he came to power,
telling, isn't it?
He's made
Can't get anything done.
Exactly, precisely. And he's now sort of sacking 120,000 of them, and presumably
they won't. I can tell you right now they won't.
You think?
No.
Well, I think he also hopes that will send
whatever
a message.
The number is, they're not going to do it. I'll tell you that right now.
But I don't think politically appointed civil servants is a good idea, because actually what does that mean in reality? Well, it probably means essentially more politicians.
Special advisors. But
right, but I'm not sure the idea
if civil servants won't do the job they've been asked to do, which is to be servants of the elected representatives, then they need to go.
And I think that's one thing. But
do as you're sodding well told should be the answer they're told.
The idea that more people that attach themselves to a particular politician who ends up with a top job then being in charge of a massive, department, I don't think is a great idea. idea.
Because
we should
they
value the
wouldn't be as good as the
experience.
people in charge right now
Yeah,
who've
I
got
think
their
so.
Oxbridge degrees and all went to the right schools
Well,
and
hang
are
on.
utterly useless.
Hang on, if they were politically appointees, that would be far more the case that they'd be from a narrow
I
group.
don't care what anyone, but I just want people to do the job. I refuse to accept that people can vote for Brexit, they can vote for whether a Tory government or a Labour government. I expect the civil servants to do what the Labour Prime Minister says. I hold no candle for Keir Starmer, but he's a democratic elected leader of this country, and if he wants something to happen that was within the law and his Parliament has voted for it with his majority elected by us, they should sodding well do it. And if they don't want to do it, they should quit.
Well, I think that's fair enough. And actually, one of the problems they have in the civil service is that it's very hard to sack somebody.
Yep.
So in most of our jobs, if you get something wrong, if you underperform, if you don't deliver,
Yep.
well,
Yep.
you might be out. You're still here, but
somehow
other people are out. And civil servants don't have that. And not only that, but the person that says the awkward question, the difficult reality, you hear former civil servants speak of this, well, they're not the ones that get ahead because their boss isn't going to appreciate that.
You have to sign up to or everything as well. Fascinating. Again, I think that is a big part of what is broken about this country. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Lots of you getting in touch about broken Britain. 2/3 of voters saying that Britain is heading in the wrong direction, is broken. I want to know from you, what do you think is broken and how would you fix it? 12:24 is the time. We'll get your calls up next. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Who's a strong leader? Who do you trust to have radical solutions to fix the nation's problems? Farage is outpolling Starmer in all of those. The only thing Starmer leads by is who do you trust to deliver the NHS? And Starmer's only got a 5-point lead on that. And given how much that Labour have been pummelling the reform and pummelling Farage about the NHS, you can see they're clearly trying to solidify that. But on everything else, especially on immigration, it's all going Farage's way right now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:27 is the time. Coming up, we're going to be talking about more Brexit betrayal from Labour and the latest asylum madness with Stephen Wolfe. And we're going to talk about the NHS fast-tracking minorities. Once again, it's just anti-white racism by another name, isn't it not? We'll be talking about all of that. Let's go to your phone calls right now. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This new poll for The Sun shows that 2/3 of voters in Red Bull seats believe Britain is heading in the wrong direction and is broken. I want to know, is it broken? What is broken? And how would you fix it? Tony's on the line. He's in Lancashire. Hello, Tony.
Hello there, UK.
Hello, very well. All the better for talking to you. What's broken and what would you do to fix it?
Oh, well, when I heard you said I had to actually pull the car over and had to write a list.
I was going to say, I'm still writing mine. It's gone on for that long.
Oh, this is just 5 minutes. This is him sitting there in 5 minutes, what I've actually written. So reclaim the utilities. They need to be controlled by the country, not by any Tom, Dick and Harry that happens to have a few billion quid knocking about. I would deport foreign criminals, anything beyond traffic offences. I would just send them straight back. I wouldn't even bother putting them in our prisons. I would have a prison plane that is just permanently shipping these people out. I would seize criminal assets and it would be auctioned off to pay for all of this. I would ban... I am sick to death of seeing feral teenagers dressed in black with hoodies on. I would ban...
Yeah, especially when it's 30 degrees.
But yeah, I had them circle my car a couple of weeks back. I was just in a car park one evening, and they were circling my car, knocking on my windows.
Oh.
You know, no goods coming out of that.
Yeah.
Electric bikes must be registered, or again they would be seized.
All bikes and all scooters and licensed. I'm with you on that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No passport, you would be arrested. If you arrive here with no passport, you'd be arrested because why are you coming here with no passport? We're just bringing.
Then what do we do with them? I mean, you're basically an illegal migrant if you arrive like that. What should we do with them?
They're straight on my prison plane. They're going straight back.
Go back to where if we don't know where they're from, and the country won't accept them, and the plane just circles around the airport and they say we're not taking them.
All right, we have some sort of floating prison barge, and you dump them on there until they tell you where they're from.
I think it would work. I'm not going to lie. I think it would work.
Yeah, but and then stop the benefits. This is not the land of milk and honey. You cannot. This is not the ultimate goal to get here for a free pass, which is why they're coming. And also, I would bring back police powers, and I would bring back profiling, so you can stop somebody in the street. Because where I live, we've got a town centre full of scrote bags that have never worked a day in their life. Yet they're sitting on £5,000 mountain bikes. They're sitting on.
Yeah.
And my daughter's actually in the police, and I said, why can't you just go and ask him where he got that from? Oh, you can't do that. I'll get in trouble for doing that.
Right.
What's wrong?
But then police don't get in trouble largely unless it goes in the papers for asking somebody about, something they've said to their child's school or something they've wrote on social media. So basically just a little bit of common sense and a little bit of be ruthless with the people who have no right to be here and aren't making contribution and basically sort it all out. I mean, works for me.
Absolutely. I have seen my town go from a nice place to be to an absolute dump, to the point where I wish 20 years ago I'd have got out of here.
This is my worry. This is my biggest worry, that our young people are going to feel that way. We're going to lose our brightest and our best. This should be a place where people want to stay and feel they've got a future here. Tony, I appreciate your call. Again, I just wish we could... I don't want us to be a downer because I want us to do something. That's why I'm asking, what can we do to fix it? But there are simple solutions. I just don't think our political leadership even acknowledge the problems. That's the bit that worries me. Thank you for that, Tony. Chris is on the line. He's in Epsom. Hi, Chris. What do you want to say?
Hi, Julia.
Hey.
Well, I could talk on just about every subject you've touched on this morning, but I want to stick to how we fix broken Britain. And Starmer has an opportunity if he uses common sense. Even if you support the view of climate change, or you want to be good for the environment, all right? Ed Miliband, forget his personal travels, is the biggest environmental impactor in the world, because what he's done is he's shipped offshore all of the responsibilities of our emissions.
Yeah. If you import the gas and everything else, you're just exporting them. But they don't show up on our sheet. You see, that's why it's all just an accounting load of nonsense.
When we forget about the slaves that are making the enslaved Ouija's that are making the solar panels, and he's just signed we know what they've done. The Chinese played the long game with the blast furnace.
Yeah.
And he's last month he signed another agreement to have the Chinese involved in our critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
This is a joke. Now, even if you support, as I was saying, even if you support environmental change, right, for the good, okay, human emissions account for 11% of what is emitted totally. We account for 1% of the 11%.
Yep.
We make not one iota of difference to what the world is doing. China built 158 coal-fired power stations last year to produce the stuff that we're buying.
And also to produce the wind turbines and the solar panels, laughably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, what we do is if Starmer really wants to be a leader, if he wants people like me, a conservative from a conservative family, who I didn't vote for him, but I did wish him well when he got in, because I was fed up with the Conservatives. But if he wants to be a true leader, he gets rid of Miliband now, and he gets rid of net zero.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I don't think Ed Miliband does survive more than much of a year. But again, you've got to remember, Keir Starmer signed up to all this madness as well as so much the Labour Party and indeed the Tory Party, Lib Dems, Greens, everybody else as well. Chris, thank you for that call. Just a quick word on that, Benjamin Butterworth. Chris basically says the way to fix Britain would be to scrap net zero.
I don't agree. I think the danger of that in the medium to long term is incredibly serious. But
is it?
Yes, I think it is. But the hypocrisy of it is that we actually just outsource a lot of our emissions to China.
Would you do that?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying is the hypocrisy of it. Although China does.
Well, if we didn't outsource it, we would then be living. We wouldn't have the lights on right now.
Well, China has committed to net zero by 2060.
No,
so
they haven't. They've not given a date, and they say it's utter nonsense. No, they haven't. It's utter nonsense. It's absolute. They have not remotely committed to net zero, quite sensibly, because that would be madness for them. That's not going to happen. No one thinks it's going to happen. We're not going to. 2050 is not going to happen for us. Anything to 2030. None of this stuff in any way survives any contact with reality, which is why everything ends up getting pushed back. Keir Starmer's clever enough to know that.
I think you underestimate innovation, and actually technology is a massive opportunity that we in this country are particularly well placed to be at the forefront.
I mean, we're not, because we've got high energy costs because of net zero.
But I mean, innovation.
That's why people aren't investing in AI here. That's why if you're a tech startup in this country and you've got to make billions, you move to the States because you can afford to do that.
Well, we get more tech investment than any other European country.
Any other European country.
Any other European. Well.
Tell me the big European tech company. There isn't one. There isn't one in Britain. There isn't one in Europe. Why? There's a reason why.
I think
they're happening in America and Asia. That's telling. Does that not tell you something?
Well, it tells you something. But
we're brilliant at inventing things. You can't innovate anything because you have to outsource it because you can't afford to produce anything here. Oh, I'm sorry. I've done facts again. No. Benjamin, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to undermine you with my facts again. 12. You got 30 seconds because I've got to go to a break.
No, I was going to say we get more foreign direct investment than any country in Europe, especially in the tech sector.
Than any country in Europe.
I think they might not be massive household names I could bring up.
There is
are loads of fantastic
major big tech company which is the future in AI that is in Britain. Full stop. And there's a reason why they need energy. You cannot have a strong economy, strong defence, strong future of this country unless we have cheap, affordable, secure, reliable energy. Net zero is the opposite of that. Full stop, end of. That's it. And anyone who doesn't recognise that is living in cloud cuckoo land and condemning our country to economic and military insecurity. And I think these people should be ousted from all British politics because I think these people are a danger to our nation. There speaks Reverend Hartley-Brewer. 12:37 is the time. Stephen Wolfe up next talking about Brexit betrayal and the latest asylum madness. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. For me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:39 is the time. Let's talk to Stephen Wolfe now, former MEP, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. A very good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Julia, lovely to see you again.
Lots to talk about. No, I mean, where do we even start? Let's talk about a bit of Brexit backsliding. This is a plan, we're told, to take Britain back under the rule of EU judges. What does this involve?
What it means is that the Conservative government had decided that we needed to remove ourselves from aspects of European law that applied to businesses in this country, which meant that the European courts would be supreme over decisions where there was conflict over how a business decision had applied, or a decision between departments that were having investments in parts of Europe and vice versa. Some of those aspects of foreign FDI that you've just been talked about. And on that point, sorry, Julia, only because I've been researching this very clearly since the trade, the US has 1/3 of all FDI in
What
this
do you say, FDI?
Foreign direct investment that you've just been talking about.
Yep.
And if we mess around with America, then we're going to be even a worse state than the rest of Europe. And that's why we need to have a trade deal.
Yep.
And it has nothing to do with investment. Literally, very few of it is invested in modern tech companies that you've been just discussed about.
That's
a lot
very
of it is
interesting.
financial services.
I want to come on to actually what JD Vance, the US VP, has had to say in terms of a possible exit. But in terms of us being dragged back under the rule of EU judges, again, not dragged, we will be handed over by the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We know Keir Starmer spent 4 years desperately trying, well, the best part of 4 years, trying to stop Brexit from happening and undermining that referendum for Brexit. Wanted to have a second referendum just to confirm. I mean, let's have a second vote on last July's election just to confirm that's what voters want. Not sure that would go very well for him, looking at the polls at the current time. But the thing is, we wouldn't even be a member of this court anymore, have no say whatsoever, and yet we'd say they could have a say. But this stuff about dynamic alignment, I remember all the debates about Brexit. This is one of the, but it's a code phrase, isn't it? Dynamic realignment, basically alignment. Sorry, basically means you go along with all the EU's rules, not just the EU rules today, but anything they do in the future. Well, at that point, can you even get a US trade deal?
Well, I think it'd be incredibly difficult, and this is why we've had problems with our trade deal already in terms of the way that our ambassadors and trade advisors have gone out, because what you see in the US is they do not want us aligned with the rules and regulations of the European Union, which they see as an anathema to free trade and an anathema to have an equal trade. Yeah. And if we start doing what this repeal, or rather non-enactment of the legislation that the Conservatives were going to put in place, it means that we have to follow the rules of the European Union, even though on trade and perhaps things like technology or the rules related to products that the EU are already doing in Europe, in the Commission, in the Council and in the Parliament, and we're not there. Strategic alignment means we just do as we're told from the EU, and if we disagree, we allow the European Court to make a decision, which we know will back them.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is the thing. It's so blatant. I mean, do they really think we're that stupid, or they really not care? Again, they do think we're stupid because they think we made the wrong decision in 2016 and again in 2019 to get Brexit done. But it is interesting. This is, alongside the plan, the discussions about, for instance, allowing under 30s to be able to travel freely between European Union and Britain. We were told, oh, well, that's a good thing. These are young people. They're not going to be needing NHS care. They're going to be net contributors and the like. But this is just freedom of movement by the back door, isn't it?
Absolutely. What businesses that are basically in London and some of the cities are saying is we haven't got enough baristas, we haven't got enough people working in cleaning companies, we haven't got enough people who are working in the pubs that we can have at cheaper labour, particularly now that you've increased our VAT and national insurance. So we need cheaper labour, and the best way to do it is, wasn't it great when we had all those EU students piling into London, 5 or 6 of them living in a flat, earning wages that no one who was a family or an individual born in this country could afford to have that flat, because why would they want to share 5 or 6? But they were here for a short period of time. So what are we doing, Julia? I see that as modern day corporate slavery being enacted by those who believe in freedom of movement for young people. They'll give it as the idea that, hey, This is them giving opportunities to see London, travel the world.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's a corporate slave. And
but I don't like the word slave, but it's cheap labour, certainly. But the key thing is, I mean, of course, the argument is that and our young people can go and do it, but it's the political classes and the upper middle classes who do this and go, oh, well, everyone goes for a gap year working in Italy. No, they sodding well don't. I mean, they really don't. That's not a thing for normal people.
No, and I'm always recall when we get that particular story as a Nigerian ambassador when I was doing a TV interview about immigration, and they challenged those who are supporting mass immigration and bringing in nurses and doctors from African countries, and they said, why is it that we put money into our infrastructure, train our doctors, train our nurses, and you send out your people to drag them into your country with higher wages? That is to us a little bit of corporatism, and why is it in our interest? You are stealing from us.
I would say it's the worst kind of colonialism, but it's okay. Absolutely. Apparently, because of a good cause. I'm going to ask you just finally, because we've had so many stories. I have to say the Telegraph has been leading the way on this, week after week, day after day, exposing yet another insane ruling, I mean immoral ruling from an appeal tribunal when it comes to asylum, where the Albanian who didn't want to be sent back because he was able to win his appeal because his son wouldn't like foreign nuggets. We've got a paedophile who's allowed to stay in the country because it would be too damaging to his children, even though he was a paedophile, if he was sent back. You name it, they didn't. Again and again. The Times today, they've got a story about 2 lesbians who were from Albania. They've been allowed to stay in Britain after they told a judge they face persecution in Albania, even though homosexuality is legal in the country. But basically they say that the population is largely conservative and patriarchal, and therefore they wouldn't face tolerance there. And a specialist judge rejected the Home Office argument, basically saying it's not an issue, they're not going to a country where it would be illegal, and ruled the couple could remain in Britain on human rights grounds as they faced a risk of potential discrimination. Now, I mean, we've had this with people claiming to be gay young men from some Middle Eastern and African countries on the same basis. Basically, anyone can just turn up in this country and say they are gay and say, well, people might not like me being gay, even if it's legal in the country I come from, and get to stay. That's madness.
Yes, and it is not only madness in the way that we're looking at the rules when you look at a country like Albania, which is being considered to be brought into the European Union. Did that judge take into consideration that particular fact?
Yeah.
Albania, which has done deals with European countries to have people deported or removed from their countries and sent back to Albania. If it's so bad, then why is it an issue for them? But this has really massive repercussions. I actually, on the basis of this story, I wrote to the Albanian ambassador this morning to ask if his country is indeed a danger to lesbians and homosexual couples, as this judge has now said, because if we do, the Foreign Office will need to put a report up on its own website saying it's dangerous for people to go to Albania.
Exactly.
And that we will need to have changes to a lot of our own dealings with Albania on the back of this discrimination.
Exactly.
So the ramifications are much deeper.
Absolutely. Stephen Wolf, thank you very much indeed. Actually, Benjamin Brussels, just bring you on that. But also Hungary, of course, an EU country, their parliament has voted by a 2/3 majority to outlaw any public celebrations, demonstrations of, it was reported in the media as LGBTQ plus, whatever. Again, I don't want the plus this, I don't want the Qs. That's all literally, as I always say, not a thing. T's got nothing to do with the LGB at all, completely different things. But banning those demonstrations, I certainly don't want gay pride to be banned. I think people should be allowed, if they want to have trans pride, I have no issue with it. But I mean, what do you make of that ban in that country? They're saying basically our children have a right not to basically be indoctrinated with this stuff.
Well, Hungary has become quite authoritarian on these things, and it's not freedom.
It's a democratic vote.
It's not freedom. It's
democratic vote.
But it's abuse, right? It's abuse of those people in Hungary who are gay or trans or any of those things to not be able to lead their lives in peace and privacy.
What about the abuse of? I mean, I'm not supporting that law, but the abuse of women in this country, for instance, who can't live our lives in freedom, go to the toilet, being sure a man's not going to be in there, and the law say it's okay.
Well, I don't share that conclusion. I don't think that's ever happened to you. But trans people exist in both directions.
No one said they didn't exist.
No, I said they exist in both directions. A person who's become a man.
You wouldn't be threatened. You wouldn't be. They don't
would go
become
into
a
my
man.
loo.
They believe they are living as if they are. You would not be, as a man, you would not be intimidated by a woman entering the loos.
But I tell you what's absurd is that you could have someone who looks like a man but is physically a female in your toilet, and so I don't think that really solves the problem you're referring to.
But the problem is that there shouldn't be any men in women's toilets. But the thing, so you're talking about the rights of trans or gay people, but what about the rights of I mean, again, I don't agree with that law, and the fact that it includes gay people as well as trans. I think trans activists are out of control. I don't think what they're doing is the solution. But I would argue that, you know what, the non-stop rubbing it in everyone's faces, thrusting it down people's throats, ongoing attack on other people's rights to live freely themselves by trans activists, nothing to do with gay rights activists, in my view. Except you've got gay rights. I mean, there is equality, there is legal equality, full stop. I think that to a certain extent, I'd say, brought on themselves in Hungary.
But no, I don't accept that. I mean, Hungary is becoming incredibly abusive to that section of society. But one country, Albania, I'm sure, I mean, I know, because I know one or two gay Albanians, it's much harder than it is here. But the laws are actually much the same as Britain. And that's because countries that want to join the EU, one of the things they have to fix at the first stage of that is kind of banning homosexuality, those kind of discriminations.
Right.
So it seems very unfair.
We will have to leave that there. Up next, going to talk about the NHS fast-tracking minorities. It's just anti-white racism by any other name, isn't it? That's up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Right, now I'm not fussed about police officers having a whole raft of qualifications, but they must be able to read and write. And I understand in 2025, if by way of a recruitment drive, they need to teach people how to read and write, which I would still find a bit astonishing, then so be it. But police officers write statements, read them out in court, write crime reports and the such like. Anyway, there's so much lunacy about policing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 12:53. Just time to squeeze in one more topic, and that is NHS Trust fast-tracking ethnic minority to top jobs. We've been hearing about fast-tracking ethnic minorities in the police, in every other sort of area of life, but it's definitely happening in the NHS as well. At least 11 major hospital trusts around England have schemes or programmes focused on helping ethnic minority employees to gain promotion to senior roles. But why would they need that in an organisation which has a hugely diverse population among its employees? employees. Let's talk to Martin Gower. He's a former chairman of an NHS trust and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Martin.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much. And what do you make of this policy? Because I don't understand why anyone needs to be fast-tracked or given priority in any procedure whatsoever because of the colour of the skin, because it's utterly irrelevant to whether you're a good candidate or not, isn't it?
It's absolutely not relevant. People should be appointed solely on their merit. Moreover, if you start fast-tracking people, you're actually looking away from one of the prime issues for recruiting, which is actually you should be advertising a position widely to give everybody the opportunity to apply, and you actually appoint the best people, especially in an environment like the NHS. You know, this is a healthcare organisation, and there is no compromise to having the very, very best people doing the job.
Lives are literally at stake. It does matter. But also, the NHS, we're constantly told, this is a bizarre thing, we need to have effectively quotas to, fast-track people of different ethnicities, minority ethnicities in this country to top jobs in the NHS. And at the same time, we're told the NHS couldn't function without immigrants and with people from diverse backgrounds who make up a huge number of the people on the staff. Anyone who's been to a hospital in recent years will have noticed a hugely diverse population of the staff and at all levels. So I don't understand why you would even need, even if you thought that was, I personally think it's utterly irrelevant. If I was in a company or in a public service where everyone was white or everyone was black or a mix of the two or Asian, I don't care, I'm not interested, it's totally irrelevant. But why does an organisation which already has an incredibly diverse workforce think they need it to be more diverse?
Because the DEI cult has taken hold in some sections of the NHS, and actually, it is quite negative for people who are fast-tracked. Exactly. Because if you have members of a team who feel they're only there because of their race, their sexual orientation, or whatever it is, that's actually quite damaging to them. Absolutely. And I had a couple of occasions where I personally had to talk to a new board member who felt that she had been appointed because of her colour. And I had to assure her that she was overwhelmingly the best candidate for the job at the interview.
Here's the question, though: why did she take the job if she thought that?
Well, she didn't think she took the job because she probably thought she was the best candidate, but she just wanted to make sure
that wasn't why. Not that anyone would ever tell you that was the reason why, but I think I agree with you, and I mentioned on the show earlier, I feel the same way about it is just another way of saying quotas. We have targets, we have fast tracking. It's another way of talking about quotas, really. Quotas for women, I think, are equally damaging, and we don't want a situation where people say like, oh, well, they're not very good. It's because they were fast-tracked. It's because of ethnicity. Because that, again, it just creates a whole new band of racism. It's anti-white racism. It undermines the people who are ethnic minorities who would get those jobs anyway. And as I've said before, if they think that their recruitment process and the people carrying out recruitment are racist and not employing people because of the colour of their skin, they should get rid of the recruiters.
And Julia, the biggest thing that will happen over the end of NHS England and 9,000 jobs going, the biggest part of the plan will be how they address the DEI aspects of that.
Yeah, this diversity, equity and inclusion, all the stuff that's gone wrong.
Absolutely.
Well,
and it'll be about apportioning that rightly or to the advantage of increasing our diversity.
Yeah. I have a funny feeling the NHS is one of the worst. I think along with the police, probably the worst in Britain on that. Martin Gower, former NHS Trust Chairman, thank you for that. Just Benjamin Butterworth recently, we're talking today about what's broken about Britain and what can we do to deal with it, that new poll from The Sun. I think one of the things that's most broken is DEI. I think a lot of people think it's well-meaning, but I think it's horribly damaging to a meritocracy.
I think there are lots of places where it helps people realise that they can get to the top who didn't otherwise. But why
didn't they think they could get to the top otherwise?
Well, the very fact, the woman in his anecdote who wasn't sure that she was good enough, but clearly she was good enough. No, she did
think she was good enough. She just thought that was why she was appointed.
I think you can't be what you can't see, so it's a good thing. But when it comes,
because we can't see anybody of colour in upper echelons of any institution at all, can we?
When it comes to the NHS...
Have you been blind for the last 10 years?
Yeah, I've not got great eyesight.
Apart from, of course, if they're Tories and they're in power, of course, they're just, they're what they call coconuts or goodness knows what. They're the wrong kind of ethnic minority, aren't they?
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't use that word. But when it comes to the NHS, I think we need more GP places rather than these things.
OK, very well. Benjamin, thank